Today's story is about an angry, spiteful moon. It is from the Tlingit Indians of Alaska. The moon plays an important part in the lives of the Tlingits because most of their food comes from the sea. The moon was considered to be a powerful god to be reckoned with. The Tlingits have a very rich culture and a strong imagination. In today's story, look for the many beautiful examples of Tlingit designs. You will notice the symbol of an eagle perched on the bow of a boat, on the totems, and on the grandmother's house. This design is based on an old Tlingit legend of Eagle Woman who turned herself into an eagle in order to save her children. The design on grandmother's dress is from a spoon, because you see, the Tlingits made beautiful incised spoons out of animal horn. And you will see faces which look like ceremonial masks. In many Indian legends, people are transformed into animals and other beings in order to accomplish their goals. The masks worn in ceremonies which depict these tales are called transformation masks. Look for the moon crest on the moon's house and a whale design on the blankets. In fact, be sure to watch very closely. You'll see designs representing the Northwest Coast Indians throughout the entire story. But apart from the designs, the angry moon may be similar to other stories that you've heard before. Tell me if it is. It's now time to listen to The Tale of the Angry Moon. One very bright summer night, when the moon was full, Lupin and Lapuinsa were walking in the grassy country that surrounded their village. They were good friends. Tonight, the moon was full and especially bright. It almost seemed to be watching them. Lapuinsa laughed and said, "What a funny face the moon has! How ugly it is!" "Be quiet," said Lupin. "It is not good to speak badly about the moon." Suddenly, the field was covered in darkness, and a strange shimmering rainbow appeared from out of the shadows and surrounded Lapuinsa. She was frightened and cried out for Lupin. He stepped toward her, and the rainbow disappeared, and the darkness disappeared, and Lapuinsa disappeared. Lupin was all alone in the bright moonlight. He called and called, but there was no Lapuinsa. He ran to the top of a hill and cried. "The moon has taken her," he thought. As his tears dried, he looked up at the sky and saw a brilliant star right beside the moon. A strange idea came into his mind. "I wonder if I can hit the star." He took out his bow and arrow, and aiming very carefully at the star, shot at the star. The star disappeared. Strangely, his arrow did not come back. Again and again Lupin shot his arrows towards the empty space where the star had been. The arrows never returned. Lupin had been shooting arrows all night. And with the first rays of the morning sun, the line of arrows turned into a ladder leading up to the sky. Without knowing why, Lupin picked some branches from a nearby bush and put them in his hair. And then he began to climb the ladder up into the sky. He was afraid. Powerful winds made the ladder spin around. A sudden rainstorm poured down on him, and the ladder became wet and slippery. He hung on tightly and did not fall. He was still climbing the ladder when night came. Lupin wrapped himself about the ladder and fell asleep. The sunrise of another day shone on Lupin. He had never seen the sun so bright. The heaviness of his head made him reach up to touch it. He put his hand up to find that the branches in his hair had grown into bushes full of big, sweet berries. He was amazed, but he was also very hungry, so he ate the berries and threw away the branches. All day long he climbed above the clouds. At nightfall, he reached the top of the ladder. He was very tired, so he lay down and fell asleep. He was awakened by a small voice.
"Wake up! I am coming for you! Wake up! My grandmother wishes me to bring you to her. She has been watching you climb here from Earth."
Lupin was very surprised. There was a small boy looking at him. And so Lupin followed the boy over the sky road to the grandmother's house. She was glad to see Lupin and welcomed him. They sat around the fire. The grandmother said,
"It is I who helped you on your way to this country. I could tell you were brave and had great need to come up to the sky."
"I have come to find Lapuinsa," Lupin said.
"Yes," said the grandmother. "She has been captured by the moon who lives near here."
They could hear Lapuinsa's voice wailing in the distance. Lupin wanted to go to her, but the old grandmother told him to eat first, to regain his strength. She raised her hand 3 times, and each time food appeared. First, a fish appeared. Then a toasted ear of corn. She raised her hand a 3rd time, and fresh fruit appeared. Lupin ate hungrily and felt refreshed.
"Now, when you go to the house of the moon, you must take 4 things."
The grandmother gave him a pine cone and a fish eye, then a rose and a small stone. He was to use these to help him rescue Lapuinsa. Lupin hurried into the land of the moon. The closer he came to the moon's house, the louder Lapuinsa's cries became, and he began to run. Now he could see her up on the roof, caught in the smoke hole, with the fire licking at her heels. He quietly ran to the roof so that the moon could not hear him. Lapuinsa was so happy to see him, she stopped crying. "Don't stop crying," Lupin whispered. "Cry louder. I don't want the moon to know that you are getting away." So she cried louder as Lupin pulled her from the smoke hole. He put the pine cone in the smoke hole, and it made a crying sound, just like Lapuinsa. Hand in hand, they started to run. Then the pine cone stopped crying, and the moon became very angry. He had been tricked. He thundered out of his house, speeding after Lapuinsa and Lupin. He rolled much faster than they could run. Lupin turned and threw the fish eye at him. And where it fell, a large lake appeared. The moon was going so fast he could not stop and rolled into the lake. He was wet and cold as he rolled out of the lake. He had to roll around the lake, but he was fast. He quickly caught up to Lupin and Lapuinsa. Lupin threw the rose at the moon, and he became tangled in roses and thorns. As he came through them, he was very angry. He rolled even faster. When Lupin saw the moon behind them, he threw the stone at the moon, and a huge mountain appeared. It was too high for the moon to climb. It just rolled up and down again. Tired and breathless, Lupin and Lapuinsa finally reached the grandmother's house. They were welcomed by the grandmother and the child, and they rested. Then the grandmother said,
"Your ladder is waiting for you. You may return to your home on earth if you wish."
They said goodbye and started to climb down the ladder, down through the thick puffy clouds. As they reached the earth, the sun was setting. The rays of the sun touched the ladder, and it disappeared, leaving a pile of arrows on the ground. The children picked them up and put them in their quiver. Then they joyfully ran home. The people of the village were very happy to see them, and for the rest of their lives, people came from far and near to hear their story about the angry moon. The story is still told in the village today.
Did this story remind you of other stories you've heard before? I'll bet it did. The angry moon may have reminded you of Hansel and Gretel. You see, stories from all over the world can be very similar. In the American Indian tribes, the storytellers were considered very important people because all of the stories have such deep meanings. The Indians respected the storytellers and loved them. Look for Tlingit and other stories of the Northwest Coast Indians. You can find them in your school or public library. Share a story with a friend so our tales will never end.
The preceding program was funded in part by a grant from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Navajo Indians are from the southwestern part of the United States, mainly Arizona and New Mexico. They are excellent farmers and artists, well known for their turquoise and silver jewelry and for their weaving. The beauty of their rugs is known all over the world. Our first story is a Navajo legend about our good friend Coyote. Trotting Coyote, as he is called by the Navajo, is used as an example of how not to be. He tries to cheat and trick and always loses in the end. In our second legend, we will see what happens to Coyote when he meets the Beaver people. Listen now to the tales of Coyote and Cottontail and Coyote and the Beaver people.
One day, Trotting Coyote was sitting on a riverbank. He was very hungry and sad because he had not eaten all day. He had not caught a single cottontail or even a tiny mouse. All of a sudden, a cottontail jumped from the bushes where he was hiding and kicked up a great cloud of sand right in Coyote's face. Coyote ran after the cottontail thinking, what a delicious dinner that cottontail will make. Coyote was much faster than Cottontail and easily caught him. Just as he was about to take a bite out of the rabbit said,
Stop! Don't eat me!
Coyote was so surprised he almost dropped the rabbit.
Rabbits don't talk, he thought. What a strange rabbit. First he jumped from a bush where he could have hidden, and now he's talking.
Coyote decided to hear what the rabbit had to say.
You'll be sorry if you eat me,
said the Cottontail.
I have no meat on my bones. Why be in such a hurry? I can't escape from you. You are much too big and strong. I'd like to talk to you for a while, but you are squeezing me too hard. What do you want to talk about?
Said Coyote as he stopped squeezing a little. The Cottontail thought fast. He was trying to think of a way to escape.
Let's talk about people. I know all about people. I know much more about people than you do, said Coyote, and he squeezed a little harder. The Cottontail said, You think you know so much about people. Why, I'll bet you think they carry their weapons on their backs.
Coyote said,
That's right, on their backs. And I'll bet you always stay as far away from people as you can. You never really see their weapons. That's why you are wrong. I have seen them carry their weapons in their hands.
Cottontail was trying to keep Coyote's mind off his empty stomach. Coyote was squeezing him tightly again. Cottontail said,
Stop squeezing me so hard, cousin. You have me, and I can't escape. Let's talk for a little while longer. Then you may eat me.
Coyote said,
I'll let you talk more about people and their weapons, but make your story very short.
Coyote was very annoyed. Cottontail was trying not to show how scared he was. He sure didn't want to be eaten.
Well, cousin,
said Cottontail,
what they do is carry a bow and arrow. They hold the bow up, put the arrow at the bowstring, and pull it as hard as they can. And then the arrow flies to its mark.
Coyote said,
No, that's not the way it is. They carry the bow and arrows on their backs, and they shoot from over their shoulders.
Cottontail thought to himself,
Here's my chance to escape. Stop holding me so tightly, and I will show you how it's done.
Coyote loosened his grip as Cottontail raised his arms. Then Cottontail jumped to the ground and ran away as fast as he could. Coyote chased the rabbit in and out of the bushes, but he never quite caught him. Then Cottontail kicked a thorny yucca plant right into Coyote's mouth. While Coyote was trying to spit out the yucca needles, Cottontail ran into a small cave in the rocks. Coyote couldn't go in after Cottontail because he was too big, so he pretended he wanted to talk. Cottontail said,
I know you don't really want to talk. You want to eat me.
Coyote said,
If you don't come out, I'm going to smoke you out with cedar bark or sagebrush.
Cottontail said,
Oh, good! Cedar bark and sagebrush are my favorite foods. Then I'll get some pinyon pitch. That will fix you,
said Coyote. Cottontail pretended to be afraid. Coyote piled some rocks in front of the small opening. Then he went to get the pitch. Soon he returned and made a fire and placed the pitch on it. Cottontail pretended to cry.
Oh, please don't blow the smoke on me. I won't be able to breathe.
Coyote blew the smoke into the crack where the rocks were. Cottontail pretended to cough. But he wasn't getting any of the smoke because Coyote was blowing it into the rocks. Cottontail said,
Blow hard so it will be all over.
Coyote got as close to the fire as he could and blew and blew. He could just taste that rabbit. Suddenly, Cottontail pushed the hot rocks. They fell into the fire and Coyote's face. Cottontail jumped past Coyote and escaped. It took Coyote a long time to get the smoke and dirt from his face. He didn't clean his face very well. He was too busy thinking of the dinner he had lost. That's why, to this very day, the coyote has black streaks on his face. On another day, Trotting Coyote was sitting near a little pool, picking flowers and watching some beaver people playing the hoop and pole game. He had not played the hoop and pole game for a long time. Coyote sat down near the beavers and asked them,
What is the prize for getting the pole through the hoop?
A beaver answered,
The loser is skinned by the winner.
Coyote was surprised.
Oh, I wouldn't want to be skinned.
The beavers thought they were rid of Coyote. They continued playing. One of them threw the pole through the hoop as it was moving. He was the winner, so he began skinning the loser. The loser jumped into the water as soon as he was skinned, swam around a little, up and down, in and out, and suddenly grew a new skin. Coyote thought to himself,
Since I have magical powers, I'll bet I could grow a new skin too. I think I'll play with them.
An old beaver warned Coyote not to play. He told him to go and play his own games. Coyote begged the beavers to let him play. After much begging, the beavers said yes. They gave Coyote a pole and began rolling the hoop. Coyote threw the pole and won. He didn't know the beaver people had let him win on purpose.
I knew I would win,
boasted Coyote.
I don't want to skin anyone, but I will play another game.
The old beaver said,
If you lose, you will be skinned, and that can hurt if you're not a beaver. So I think you should stop now.
Coyote said,
I'll just grow a new skin like you beavers do.
They let him play again, and he lost. Coyote suddenly decided that he did not want to be skinned, but it was too late. Coyote yelled and howled and sure made a lot of noise. His skin was finally peeled from him. Coyote ran for the water as soon as they had him peeled. He swam around a little, up and down, in and out, but nothing happened. He got out of the water and jumped in again, swam around a little, up and down, and in and out. Still nothing. He didn't get a new skin. Seeing how upset he was, the beaver people decided to help him. The old beaver said,
Badger has extra skins in his badger hole. Maybe he will give you one. It won't hurt to ask.
Coyote agreed. He didn't care what kind of skin he got, as long as he got something to cover his skinless body. So they all went over to the badger hole, and Coyote went inside. When he finally came out, he was wearing a badger skin. To this day, the badger and the coyote have the same kind of skin.
Storytellers were very important people in all Indian tribes. They were respected for their wisdom, and they were loved. Their stories had such deep meanings. In fact, all of the customs and beliefs of the Indian had a story or legend behind them. There were lessons for everyday living woven into interesting stories. The primary concern of all tribes was to live in harmony with the Great Spirit and all that He created. Go read and enjoy Legends of the American Indian. You can find them in your school or public library. Share a story with a friend so our tales will never end.
The preceding program was funded in part by a grant from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
To the American Indian, all animals and nature, the sky and the earth, all the creatures that walk, crawl, or fly were important to everyday life. They were thought of and talked of as though they were real people. Our first story, The Dancing Stars, is an Iroquois legend. To the great Iroquois nation in the northeastern part of the United States, the Great Bear sang, and the moon smiled and talked. Everything was a creation of the Great Spirit. Our second story, The Friendly Wolf, comes from the Dakotas, where we find the Plains Indians. Their beliefs were the same as their Iroquois cousins. They respected all animals, and they learned to live with them. The Plains Indians are made up of tribes that we've all heard of. The Sioux, Arikara, Blackfoot, Cheyenne, Pawnee, the Cree, the Nez Perce, Kiowa, Comanche, Crow, the Ojibwe, the Shoshone, the Arapaho, and the Ute, and a few others. They were hunters, depending mostly on the buffalo for their food, for their clothing, and the covering for their teepees. They also hunted elk and antelope and deer. They ate the wild turnip and wild rice. I suppose they're called wild because they were not planted and cultivated by man. They were planted in the ground by the Great Spirit for our use. Now, imagine yourself sitting around a flickering indoor fire in the lodgings of your tribe. It is night, which is the best time for storytelling. The old storyteller is about to begin his stories, and it is cold outside. The soft winter snow is lightly falling. In the distance, you can hear the drumming and the singing. You and the other Indians are waiting for the storyteller to begin. Now, listen to the tales of the dancing stars and the friendly wolf.
Once long ago, when the sky and the stars and the moon and Mother Earth were just beginning, 7 brothers were playing in the forest. They loved to run and dance in the forest, always together, never separated. One evening, just as the sun was going down, the brothers heard someone singing. It was a beautiful, beautiful song coming from some faraway place. They danced away, following the sound of the music. Suddenly it was night. The little boys looked down and saw the trees and their forest, their people's longhouses, all the things they knew about, glowing in the moonlight far below them. They were in the sky, still dancing to the strange and beautiful music. They went up and up and up, and the mysterious song grew louder and even more beautiful. They could hear the words clearly now. A hunter pursued me, and I came to the sky, and now I am lost. But I will watch over you in your warm little cave here in the sky. So sleep, little ones, sleep. Then they saw a great black bear. Her belt and necklace were made of shiny white clam shells, and her beautiful tail was made of stars. In fact, stars were twinkling at her toes and her nose. It was the great bear who was singing the lullaby. They danced long into the night. At last, they stopped, for they wanted to go home. They asked the moon to show them the way, but the moon smiled gently and said, "You will live here in the sky with the stars and I, for we enjoy your dancing." Suddenly the boys no longer felt tired, and they no longer wished to go home. They started to dance again, and the great bear sang more sweetly than before. Then a bright, shining star grew around each boy. The smallest brother heard a voice calling his name. It was the voice of his mother. The little boy ran toward the voice as fast as his feet would go, and the star around him left a bright, shiny trail. "Don't go, don't go," cried the moon, and the stars, and his brothers. But the little boy would not listen. He fell past the clouds and the trees, reaching for the earth and the sound of his mother's voice. He saw his mother and reached out to take her hand. Then he landed. His mother cried when she saw that instead of her son, there was a hole in the ground made by a falling star. She looked up at the sky and called to her other sons, "Stay there! Do not come down!" She did not want them to become falling stars. The brothers waved to their mother, for they understood. and they danced on. The mother cried, and her tears fell into the hole where the star had fallen. A little sprout began to grow. It grew faster and faster, taller and taller, up into the sky. The little brother was now a tree, reaching high into the sky to be with his brothers again. Finally it reached the great bear and the dancing brothers. They were very happy to have their littlest brother back with them. To this day, when you walk through a forest, you will see the pine tree. It is the tallest tree in the forest. And at night, you can see the brothers still dancing to the lullaby of the great bear as she sings to her little cubs. It happened during berry picking time. This was in the long ago when people and animals lived together and talked to each other. It was the time when the berries were ripe and the camps were set up near the berry bushes, which grew in the valley. The berries were eaten right off the bush. Little Cloud and his little sister, Bright Eyes, ate all the berries their little stomachs could hold. Little Cloud became tired of berry picking and decided to climb the hills near the valley. He took Bright Eyes with him. They climbed higher and higher to where the grizzly bears and bighorn sheep live. Little Cloud wanted to see the place where the eagles lived, way up on top. It began to get dark. Little Cloud was afraid. He knew there were mountain lions and wolves in the hills, and the great wolf of the mountains. They looked around for a place to stay. It became darker and colder, and Bright Eyes began to cry. Then, as the owls hooted around them, they saw a small cave, so they crawled in and went to sleep. Suddenly, Little Cloud was awakened by the loud thunder and cold wind of a fierce storm. In the opening of the cave, he saw the great wolf of the mountains. He closed his eyes tightly and prayed that the wolf would not harm them. As the storm passed, it became quiet. Little Cloud opened his eyes. No wolf. Bright Eyes was still asleep. Maybe he had been dreaming. When the morning came, Little Cloud woke Bright Eyes, and they left the cave quickly. Little Cloud did not tell Bright Eyes of his night visitor, but he knew it wasn't a dream. The tracks in the sand told him so. As the day went on, they became tired and rested near a stream. The water tasted good. Suddenly they saw the great wolf. Remembering that the wolf did not harm them, Little Cloud said, "Please, great wolf of the mountain, we are lost. Help us to return home." The wolf looked kindly at the children. The great wolf reminded Little Cloud of the dogs at camp, with his tongue hanging out and his face smiling. Then the great wolf said, "It was my cave you slept in last night. Have no fear. I will take you home. Stay close to me." The wolf started off and waited whenever the children fell behind. He would run a little and stop, and run a little and stop. He let Bright Eyes ride on his back when she grew too tired to walk. Then he led them to berry bushes to eat sweet berries so they wouldn't be hungry. Finally, they reached the top of the hill that they had first climbed. From the hill, they could see their families and friends. They were very, very happy. They wanted the wolf to stay with them, but the great wolf refused. He could not go closer to the camp because there were dogs there. "Anyway, I would not be happy living in a camp. I am a wanderer. I go with my wolf friends to many places. Do not be sad. I will always remember you. And you will hear my call in the early night and think of me." As the children came down to the camp, the men raced on their horses to meet them. They picked them up and joyfully rode into camp. There was much excitement and happiness at their return. When the people heard Little Cloud's story of how the wolf had saved them, they went to the top of the hill and thanked him. They brought him beautiful gifts and food. The chiefs sat in a circle and smoked the pipe of peace. It was the sign of friendship forever between the Indians and the wolves. That friendship still lasts.
Wherever the Indians traveled, hunted, laughed, or prayed, it was a tribal affair. They were great believers in togetherness, and that togetherness always included the animals. The storytellers were very important people in all tribes. They were respected for their wisdom, and they were greatly loved. Their stories had deep meanings, for all of the customs and beliefs of the Indians had a story or a legend behind them. Many of these stories are in your school and public library. Go, read, enjoy the stories of the American Indian, and share a story with a friend, so our tales will never end.
The preceding program was funded in part by a grant from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Just as you have favorite fairy tales and stories, the Paiute Indians of long ago loved to hear the old legends told over and over again. The Paiute Indians lived mainly in Utah. According to the Paiutes, it was Coyote who taught mankind how to survive on the earth. Our first story, The Firebringer, we'll see how Coyote taught the Indians about fire. Our second story, a Kiowa legend called How Sayende Brought the Buffalo to the Indians. The Kiowa Indians are Plains Indians. They have lived on the southern plains around Oklahoma and Kansas for as long as time itself. They hunted the buffalo. Sayende, who brought many things to the Kiowa, was responsible. Now listen to the tales of the Firebringer and how Sayende brought the buffalo to the Indians.
Long ago, in the time of the beginning, when animals and humans talked to each other and lived together, there was an Indian boy called the Firebringer. He was of the Paiute tribe, with shiny dark skin and long black hair. He loved to run with the Coyote, who was the friend and counselor of his people. They would hunt together in the summer. The boy caught fish with his hands, while the women dug delicious roots. In the summer, times were good. Now, the winter was not so good. The people were cold and unhappy. This was before the tribes knew about fire. The boy spoke to the Coyote, asking his advice. "How can we help my people? They cannot keep warm in this cold. What can we do?" The Coyote thought, and then he said, "You and I will go to the burning mountain and bring back fire. It will be dangerous, but it is the only way. Gather 100 strong men and women who are your best runners." The boy went to gather the runners, but they paid no attention to him. They didn't know what fire was. But the boy continued to talk about the fire, and as the people got colder and colder, one by one, they joined him. Soon he had his 100 runners. The Coyote explained exactly what was to be done. First, in front, would be the Coyote and the boy. Then the fastest runners would follow them, and the slowest would be last. They went toward the west, over the high, snow-covered mountains. Then through dark, windy forests. The runners grew afraid. Coyote said to them, "We will rest here. In the morning, one of you will stay here until the fire comes. You will know the fire because it is red like a rose, but it is not a rose. When you see the fire, you will know it." In the morning, they headed west, leaving one man to wait for the fire. The people wondered if the fire was an animal or an enemy of some kind. Coyote explained, "Fire can be an enemy or a friend. It can hurt, but it can also help and serve us. If it is covered with rocks and sticks, it can be used to warm the people." The last runner was left to wait for the fire. Coyote and the boy continued on to the burning mountain. It was very high, with smoke and fire pouring out of its top. At night, the fire spirits danced on the mountaintop. Coyote made himself look thin and weak and unimportant, and went up the mountain. The fire spirits saw him, but ignored him because he looked harmless. As the fire spirits began to dance, Coyote stole a burning stick and ran down the mountain. The fire spirits saw him running with the fire and began to chase him. Coyote was tired and breathing hard when the boy took the burning stick from his friend and ran with the fire spirits fast behind him. The boy ran as fast as he could until he came to the runner they had left behind. This runner took the burning stick and ran on. The stick was passed from runner to runner. The fire spirits chased each runner until they were stopped by the snowy mountains. The swift runners continued through the day and night until they came to the land of the Paiute. They surrounded the fire with rocks and put sticks on it and were warmed by it, just as Coyote had told them. From that time on, the boy was called Firebringer. The name Firebringer was passed on to the Coyote because he had earned the name. To this very day, Coyote's fur is thin and yellow, as if burned along his sides. Perhaps because of the fire stick he carried in his mouth, whose flames licked at his sides as he ran down the burning mountain. Sayende was coming along, and he saw all the animals singing and dancing, and he asked them what they were doing. Owl and Dragonfly told him it was a sun dance, to show the sun how much they loved it. Coyote said, "We are having a fine time, but we are hungry. We have no food." Fox said, "We are all getting weak because we have no food." Sayende felt very sorry for the animals. As he watched the dancing, he thought of the white crow. Why is the crow so fat and his feathers so smooth? He must have plenty of food. Where does he get his food? Nobody knew. Now, White Crow always carried a bow and some arrows in a special case, and he never put it down. Sayende decided the answer to White Crow's food must be in the case. Sayende wondered how he could get the case. Then he thought of a plan. He told Fox and Coyote and Owl and Dragonfly to watch White Crow when he left the dancing grounds, to find out where he lived. They agreed. Sayende and his friends started to flatter White Crow. "Why aren't you singing? You have such a beautiful voice." White Crow was very pleased to help the singers. Sayende offered to hold the bow and arrow case for White Crow. As White Crow began singing and drumming, all the animals crowded around him so he couldn't see Sayende. Sayende took the bow and arrows out of the case and laid them down. He reached way into the case and pulled out a piece of meat. Buffalo meat. He thought to himself, "I have never tasted anything so delicious. This would be good for the Indians." The singing finished, and Sayende gave White Crow his case. As White Crow flew away, Fox and Coyote and Owl and Dragonfly all watched. He flew way up and over the nearby hill. Sayende told his friends he would stay behind and think of some way to find out where the buffalo meat was hidden. He hid near a bush and changed himself into a little puppy. He wanted White Crow's little daughter to find him. Then the little daughter came walking along and saw the puppy. The puppy began licking her ankles, and she picked him up. She wanted to keep him. But when she took him home, White Crow didn't like him. "I never saw a puppy with a mustache before." Sayende had forgotten to change his mustache. White Crow's little daughter started to cry. So he agreed she could keep the puppy if she did not take him near the meat. Sayende ate well that night, buffalo scraps. The next day, White Crow and his wife had to leave. He said to his daughter, "Remember, don't take the puppy near the meat. That is our secret." Then he and his wife left. Soon the little White Crow got tired of playing with the puppy. "I'm going to show you our secret place where we keep our meat." Sayende pretended he wasn't interested. The little girl picked him up and took him over to a big, deep hole that had been covered with a rock. Down in the hole were all the buffaloes in the world. Father buffaloes, mother buffaloes, and baby buffaloes. Indian people should have this food to share. They will never be hungry again. He started barking and jumped down among the buffaloes. The buffaloes rushed out of the hole into the sunshine. They sounded like thunder as they ran. White Crow heard the thunder and flew back home as fast as he could. He knew it was the buffaloes. As the last buffalo came up out of the hole, Sayende came out and turned back into himself. He turned to the buffaloes. "You will live here in this country, Wherever the grass shall grow, to the east, to the west, to the north, and to the south, you will roam. You will be the food for the people of this country. The buffalo listened to Sandy. They wandered and spread out over the plains, where they fed and clothed the people. And that's how the buffalo came to the Indians.
The Indians came to depend on buffalo meat for a large part of their diet, and on its skin for clothing, shelter, and many other uses. In winter, the warm skin was used for robes and blankets. No part of the buffalo was wasted. Without this magnificent animal, the Kiowa, as well as other plains tribes, possibly would have died out. Today you have heard just 2 stories of the American Indian. You can find many more in your school or public libraries. Go, read and enjoy the stories of the American Indian, and share a story with a friend, so our tales will never end.
The preceding program was funded in part by a grant from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
안녕하세요, 여러분. Hello, everyone. Our story today comes from Korea, a country in Eastern Asia. In today's story about the blind man's daughter, you will notice that the girl's name is Shim Chung. Chung is her first name, like Jenny or Maria or Susie. And Shim is her family name. As in many Asian cultures, the family name is set first. So, if your name is John Smith in Korea, you would be called Smith John. Listen now to the tale of the blind man's daughter. "500 years ago, maybe more, there lived in a certain village a girl named Shim Chung. Her mother had died long ago, and now her father was going blind. Shim Chung was very beautiful. Her face was smooth and white. Her hair was shiny and black. She was very good and honest, and she had never been sick. It was as if nothing could harm her. She guided her father when he had to work. But his blindness kept him from work, and little by little, all they owned had to be sold to keep them alive. The old man Shim became a beggar. He felt ashamed that his daughter had to go with him to beg for coins. One day, he went out alone. He tripped and fell into a ditch. He tried to climb out, but he couldn't. Then a strong hand reached out and lifted him up, and a voice spoke to him. "Give me 300 bags of rice for the temple, old man, and in time you shall have your eyes once again." It was the voice of a priest from the temple, and the old man's heart filled with hope. That evening, he told his daughter what had happened. But as he told her, his hope went away, and he got very, very sad. Aigo, there is no way for beggars like us to get so much rice." That night, as Shim-chang drifted off to sleep, she sighed, What to do? What to do?" "Do as I say," someone answered. In a dream, her dead mother told her how to get the rice and help her father see again. The next morning, Shim-chang awoke early. She dressed in a long gray gown and a big hat. Then she walked to the house of a very rich merchant. Now, this merchant owned many, many boats that brought rice to faraway China. But there was a river dragon who would not let the boats go through. He would spit water and lash the waves with his tail. It was too dangerous for boats to sail. "What must I give you? What must I do so my boats may go through?" said the merchant to the dragon. "You must bring me a beautiful girl," the dragon answered. And so the merchant spread the news far and wide. He would offer 300 bags of rice to the girl who would give herself to the dragon. Shim-chang told the merchant that she wished to offer herself to the dragon. "You do not deserve to die. You are a good daughter, and you are dutiful to your father." But there was no other way for Shim-chang to get the rice, so the bargain was made. The next day, Shim-chang watched the horses carry the bags of rice to the priest's temple. Then she bowed before the tomb of her mother and prayed, "Oh, heavenly spirits, care for my father until he is cured." And she spoke to her neighbors, "Oh, kind neighbors, care for my father until he is cured." Then she set forth to keep her part of the bargain. She wore a beautiful gown of green and red with jewels and golden ribbons in her hair. Her beauty shone brighter than the sun in the eastern sky. Soon they came to the place in the river where the dragon lashed his huge tail. It was time to sacrifice Shim-chang to the dragon. The merchant wanted to save her. "Oh, river dragon, do not take this girl." But the river dragon demanded the beautiful girl. So Shim-chang said goodbye to the merchant. She closed her eyes and jumped off the side of the boat and disappeared into the water. Instantly, the river became calm and quiet like a garden pool. Shim-chang floated through the water. Pearls flashed before her eyes. Big rainbow-colored fish danced by. and sea plants tickled her nose as she brushed past them. At last she arrived at the palace of the dragon. "Kind sir, I am the daughter of the blind beggar Shim. I am not worthy to come before one so important as you." The river dragon spoke. "A message has come to us from Hananim, the emperor of heaven and earth. You shall be rewarded for your goodness to your blind father." Then sea maidens dressed Shimchang in the finest clothes. They gave her the softest sleeping mats and the richest food. In this life of comfort and ease, Shimchang grew more beautiful than ever. Then one day, the maidens took her to a giant lotus blossom that lay on the river bottom, and they put her right in it. It was so large that it covered her completely. "Goodbye, Shimchang," said the river dragon. "Goodbye," Shimchang answered back. And soon she felt herself rising like a bubble up through the water. When she reached the top, she was floating next to the boat of the rice merchant. But the rice merchant did not see her. All he saw was the blossom. Never in heaven or on earth was there such a lotus flower as this, said the merchant. "Let us take it to the king." The merchant presented the flower to the king. The king was delighted. No one else in all the world had such a blossom. Every day he admired it floating in the garden pool. All day long, Shimchang hid inside the giant flower. Then one night, as she ventured out of the blossom, the king discovered her. She ran to hide, but the blossom had disappeared. The king looked at her. "Can this be a spirit? She is so beautiful." He called his wise men. On the day the lotus flower was brought to the king, a bright new star had appeared in the sky. That's a good sign. And so he made Shimchang his wife. Shimchang was happy in her life as a queen, but some days she would think of her poor father. "Here I have all I want, but my poor father's eyes are closed to the world." One day, the king saw her weeping. "I go, my husband," Shimchang said to the king. "I have had a dream about a blind man. It makes me cry. I should like to do something for all the blind people in the kingdom." So a message was sent to all the blind beggars of the kingdom to invite them to a feast in the king's courtyard. 1 day, 2 days, and 3 days passed. Beggars came from far and near to eat rice and kimchi. Queen Chang watched every day, hoping the next person would be her father. The end of the feast came, and still no father. Then one day, there was a noise in the courtyard. A latecomer was being pushed about by the servants. "Father, father, it is my dear father. Let him stay." She ordered her servants to dress him in new clothing and bring him to her chamber. "What wonder is this?" said the old man Shim, when he heard his daughter's voice. "Do apricots bloom in the snow? Do horses have horns? Do the dead men come to life? How can I be sure you are truly Chang?" And he rubbed his eyes. Suddenly, just as the temple priest had promised, the old man's sight returned. "Oh my goodness, you are beautiful," he said. The king welcomed Shim Chung's father into the palace, and Queen Chung was happy all day long. Her father could see again. This was the heavenly reward to the dutiful daughter of the blind beggar Shim. The story of the blind man's daughter, Shim Chung, is just one of the many folk tales from Korea. You can find others in your school or public libraries. Stories such as The Man Who Lived 1,000 Years and A Korean Cinderella, Kongji Patji. Read and enjoy the folk tales from Korea and from all over the world. Share a story with a friend so our tales will never end.
The preceding program was funded in part by a grant from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Our story today comes from the Philippines, a group of islands in the Pacific Ocean. Long ago, the early people of the Philippines made up stories to tell their children. These folk tales were the textbooks of their day. They served to preserve the history and traditions of the people. They told about events that had happened and also tried to explain the interesting things in nature that they saw about them. In a land of volcanoes, earthquakes, and violent storms, there was a lot to try to explain. Mountains erupted, and sometimes the earth shook beneath their feet, and new islands rose unexpectedly from the sea. The people were always surrounded by nature, so they were often puzzled by some of the oddities they saw. What was this fish with no bones or scales and looked like a blob of jelly? What made insects glow in the dark? Where did the eagle come from? And the crocodile? They made up a story for everything. Talking animals are found as characters in folktales everywhere, and, as is proper in a tropical country, it is a quick-thinking monkey who is the hero of today's story. Jose and the Crocodile, in its characters, setting, and topic, is a typical Filipino story. This story may be like some stories you have heard before. Tell me if it is. Now, listen to this tale of Jose and the Crocodile. It begins, noong unang panahon, Jose lived with his family in a little village next to a river. Jose's father raised coconuts, bananas, and other fruits and vegetables. One day his mother asked, "Jose, Will you please gather some coconuts? I need them for cooking and feeding the hogs, and your father would like to sell some at the market. Yes, Mother, right away, Jose answered. Jose hitched the water buffalo to a sled. He took his sharp bolo and strapped it to his waist. He climbed on the water buffalo and started looking for fallen coconuts. Jose was too small to climb the tall coconut trees, so he gathered ones that had fallen off the trees. There were not too many on the ground near the house that day, so he wandered farther and farther away. It was hard work, and Jose traveled far. The air was hot and humid. Jose and the water buffalo became very tired and thirsty. So they went to the river for a drink and a quick swim in the cool water. While Jose was splashing water on the water buffalo, he heard a groan coming from far away. It sounded like a cry of some animal in pain. Jose became worried. He jumped on the water buffalo and rode towards the sound. The groans became louder and louder as they rode. Soon, Jose saw a big rope hanging from a branch of a large tree. At the end of the rope was a net, and in the net, a big crocodile was fighting to get out. Crocodile catchers were here again, thought Jose to himself. They will make shoes and belts and bags out of this poor crocodile's skin.
Little boy, please help me. I have a wife and children, begged the crocodile with big tears in his eyes. If you set me free, I will give you a large gold ring, promised the crocodile. Jose felt sorry for the crocodile and decided to help him. Besides, he thought, when I get the gold ring, Father can sell it and we won't have to work as hard anymore. He took his bolo from its wooden sheath and stood on the water buffalo and, after several blows, cut the rope. Jose climbed off the buffalo and cut the net into pieces. The crocodile slid through the net. He was free again. Now that I have set you free, may I have the gold ring you promised me? The beautiful gold ring is in my house down the river. Hop on my back and we will go and get it. Then you will be rich.
Jose did just as he was told. Quietly, the crocodile slid down the bank into the river. Jose held tightly to the crocodile's slippery back. Foolish child, he has no idea that I want to eat him. I'm very hungry, and he will make a tasty meal. As the water got deeper and deeper, Jose asked, How much farther is your home? Are we close to it now? The crocodile turned his snout towards Jose and said, Oh, I just remembered. The ring is in my stomach. I'll have to swallow you so you can get it yourself. As Jose looked at the large teeth in the crocodile's huge mouth, he became frightened. Oh no, Mr. Crocodile, please don't swallow me. I shall never get out of your stomach alive. Let me go. Please let me go. I don't even want your ring anymore. Jose begged and begged. The crocodile decided to play a game with Jose. All right, my boy. Inasmuch as you helped set me free, I will give you a chance to be free. You must ask the next 3 things that float down the river whether or not I should eat you. If they say no, then I will set you free. But if they say yes, I will eat you up. Jose had no choice. That sounds fair enough. The first thing they saw floating down the river was an upside-down banca, which is a dugout canoe. Banca, please help me.
What can I do for you, young man? Asked the banca. Do you think it is fair for this crocodile to eat me up after I set him free from the trapper's net? Well, son, let me tell you. When I was a new banca, my owner was very proud of me. He sailed me up and down the river catching fish. I carried vegetables, rice, chickens, and even his family. But as I grew older, I acquired some leaks. So my owner decided to build another banca and sent me floating down the river. I'm slowly rotting away. People are not very grateful. Why should Mr. Crocodile be grateful? If I were he, I would eat you up. And with that, the banca floated past Jose and the crocodile. Next came a torn basket with moss growing on its sides. Basket, basket, please help me. Please tell the crocodile he shouldn't eat me after I set him free from the trapper's net. The basket creaked and said, "Huh! People wish others to be grateful, but they themselves never show gratitude. Why, when I was new, my owners took me to the market and filled me with vegetables and fruits. Yes, I was very useful. But the loads got so heavy that after a few months, I started falling apart. Then my master's wife threw me away. Here I am floating all day and all night, just rotting away. Crocodile, eat that boy up. Teach people a lesson on thankfulness." Jose was getting sadder and sadder. He cried for his mother, and he cried for his father. Then a battered old hat came floating by. "Hat, hat, please help me. Please tell the crocodile not to eat me. I set him free from the trapper's net, and now he wants to eat me. Please tell the crocodile it's not fair." The hat laughed. "Thankfulness? My boy, talk about thankfulness. I remember when I was new, my master wore me proudly. I kept him cool when the sun was hot and dry when it rained. Then I grew old and shaggy, and he threw me into the river. So here I am just floating in this river all day and all night, and I am rotting away. Crocodile, eat him up. You should not be thankful to people who do not know how to be thankful themselves." The crocodile was happy. At last he was going to have his meal. Jose cried and cried. He cried so loudly that a monkey sitting on a tree by the river heard his cries. The monkey chattered and ran up and down a branch. "Oh, Mr. Crocodile! Mr. Crocodile! Give me a ride, please! I'd like to float down the river, too," said the monkey. "Why, certainly, my dear friend. We will be happy to give you a ride," said the crocodile. "What a great meal I shall have today. A tasty boy and a monkey." "Mr. Crocodile, come closer to the riverbank so I can jump on your back. Come closer, closer." The crocodile came closer and closer. Then suddenly, the monkey threw a vine to Jose. Jose caught the vine and lifted himself off the crocodile's back and onto the tree. The crocodile snapped his jaws and lashed his long tail just inches from Jose's feet. But Jose was safe on the tree. "Thank you. Oh, thank you. How can I ever repay you for saving my life?" "Easily," said the monkey. "What I love most is bananas. Ask your father to plant enough banana trees to feed both your family and my family. That will be enough payment." "All right, I will," said Jose. Jose climbed down the tree, and the monkey jumped on his shoulder. Then they both ran to tell the story to Jose's family. And from that day on, Jose and the monkey became very close friends. Jose and the Crocodile is just one of many stories from the Philippines. You can find others in your school or public libraries. Stories like Datu Omar and the Fairy, and Princess Maring, the Huntress, and the story of the absent-minded king.
Read and enjoy the stories from the Philippines and from all over the world. Share a story with a friend so our tales will never end.
The preceding program was funded in part by a grant from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Nehoma. Hello. Come sit beside me, for I'm going to tell you a story from China. China is a very old, old country. In fact, it's the world's oldest living civilization. The Chinese people call their country Zhongguo, which means middle country. Today, most of the people live in small villages and work together in communes. But China also has several of the world's largest cities. The Chinese people are very proud of their nation, its long history, and its influence on other countries. The Chinese were the first to develop the compass, gunpowder, paper, porcelain, printing, and silk cloth. The Chinese language has many dialects. Written Chinese uses characters instead of an alphabet. Each character stands for a complete idea, thing, or sound. It's a very difficult language to learn because there are more than 40,000 characters. Our story today is an old favorite. Many Chinese stories are about gods, spirits, wizards, and even animals such as the dragon, who all have special powers. In today's story, a wizard brings happiness to a young village boy named Ma Liang. So, come, sit beside me, and I'm going to tell you the story of Ma Liang and the magic brush. A long time ago, in a small village in China, there lived a poor young peasant boy named Ma Liang. Ma Liang's parents died when he was a small child, so he could not go to school like the other children in the village. Instead, he worked all day, gathering firewood or pulling weeds for the people of the town. Every morning, Ma Liang stopped to watch the children in the schoolyard make pictures with brushes and paint. The schoolmaster showed them how to draw green trees and bluebirds and red roosters. Ma Liang was fascinated by the graceful strokes of their brushes and dreamed of all the beautiful pictures he would paint if he owned a brush. But his chores earned him only enough money for food and clothes, so of course he could not afford to buy brushes and paint. After the painting lesson was over, the children went back inside the schoolhouse, and Ma Liang went slowly back to his chores with a frown on his face and a dream in his heart. One day, as Ma Liang watched the children painting, he timidly approached the schoolmaster. "Excuse me, might I have an old brush so that I too can paint lovely pictures?" "So you think you would like to paint?" cried the schoolmaster. "You are just a poor peasant. Go back to your chores and do not come back into the schoolyard again." Ma Liang was sad, but not discouraged. "Why shouldn't I learn to paint even though I am poor?" he said to himself. "I will learn even if I do not have a brush. I will draw the things I see." At the end of the day, when he finished his chores, Ma Liang looked carefully at everything around him and drew pictures wherever he could. With a stick he drew trees and birds on the soft ground, and with his fingers he drew turtles on the sand. When he went back to his little hut, Ma Liang drew pictures on the walls with a piece of burnt firewood. Long into the night he drew picture after picture. By morning he had covered the walls with drawings of everything he could think of. Ma Liang practiced his drawing every day. Soon the birds he drew looked just like the birds in the trees. The fish he drew looked just like the fish in the river. He became so skillful that the people of his village marveled at his pictures. They would gather around him when he drew his pictures in the dirt. But Ma Liang was still sad that he did not have his own brush. Every night before he went to bed, he closed his eyes and wished for one. One night, in a cloud of smoke and a flash of light, an old wizard appeared. The old man had watched Ma Liang every day as he drew his pictures and made the village people happy. "Ma Liang," he said in a creaky voice, "you have worked very hard, and now you have earned a brush. But use it wisely, for it has great powers." And then, with another cloud of smoke and a flash of light, the old man vanished. The next morning, Ma Liang awoke and thought about his strange dream. He looked down, and in his hands was a golden brush. He blinked to see if he was still dreaming, but the brush was really there. He jumped out of bed and went to the wall of his hut. There he drew a beautiful bird with his new brush. Then, right before his eyes, the bird became real. Ma Liang watched with wonder as the bird flapped its wings and flew off the wall. It flew out of Ma Liang's window to a tree outside, where it sang sweetly for the village people. "That's amazing," thought Ma Liang. Then Ma Liang took his brush and scurried outside to a nearby stream, and on a rock he painted a toad. And just as he finished, the toad jumped off the rock and into the stream with a splash. The young boy stopped and looked again at his wonderful brush. It was magic. Everything he painted became real. Now, instead of gathering firewood and pulling weeds, Ma Liang went from hut to the poor people of his village and asked them, "What is it that you want most of all? I will paint it for you." Some said they needed clothing for their children, so Ma Liang painted clothing. A poor farmer asked for a buffalo to pull his plow. Ma Liang painted him a strong, healthy buffalo. And he painted food for the women to cook. All of the people in the village were very grateful and very happy. It was not long before the emperor heard about this young artist who was spreading good fortune throughout the village. But the emperor was a mean and greedy man. All he wanted was more and more gold for his kingdom. He wanted Ma Liang's brush for the wealth it could bring him. "Bring me the boy, Ma Liang," he commanded, "so that I might have the magic brush." So the emperor's soldiers marched to the small village to find Ma Liang. They told him of the emperor's wishes, but Ma Liang did not want to go. So the soldiers arrested Ma Liang and carried him back to the emperor's castle. Ma Liang was brought before the emperor. "So, you're the boy who paints pictures for the village people. If this is so, paint me a golden dragon," demanded the emperor. Ma Liang pretended he did not understand. He went to the wall, and instead of painting a golden dragon, he painted a green frog that leaped off the wall and landed right in the emperor's bowl of rice. Then the emperor ordered Ma Liang to paint him a bar of gold. Instead, Ma Liang drew a large yellow serpent. It attacked the emperor and had to be killed by the soldiers. The emperor was furious and grabbed the magic brush. He ordered Ma Liang thrown into the dungeon. Then the emperor called for the court painter. He handed him Ma Liang's brush and said, "Paint me a great tree with leaves of gold coins that will fall like rain when I shake the branches. Do it at once." The court painter did as he was told. When he finished, there was a beautiful picture of a tree on the wall with many gold coins on its branches. But when the emperor rushed to the tree to shake the branches, he ran right into the wall and bumped his head on it. The tree was not real. It was only a picture. Now the emperor realized that the brush had magical powers only when Ma Liang was the painter. He ordered his soldiers to bring the boy from the dungeon. When Ma Liang appeared, the greedy emperor tried to make friends with him and spoke to him kindly. "Here is your magic brush. I know I cannot use it to paint the things I want, but if you will stay in my palace and paint pictures for me, I will make you very rich." Ma Liang pretended to agree. So the emperor handed Ma Liang the brush. "Now, paint me a mountain of pure gold," he said. Ma Liang painted the mountain, but he painted it behind a great and beautiful blue sea. "Beautiful, beautiful," cried the emperor. "Now, paint me a ship so that I can sail to my mountain and bring back the gold." In a twinkling, Ma Liang painted a fine ship, worthy of an emperor. The emperor and his soldiers quickly climbed aboard and set sail for the mountain. But since there was no wind, the ship moved very slowly. So the emperor called out, "Too slow! Too slow! Paint a wind to speed us along!" Again, Ma Liang did as he was told, and he painted a huge gust of wind to move the emperor's ship. The wind tore at the sails, and great waves pounded the ship. "Too much!" cried the emperor angrily. "You will sink us!" But Ma Liang could not hear the emperor's cries. The storm he had painted was too loud. The wind howled, and the waves crashed about the wooden ship. Then with a great crack, it split in two and sank into the stormy waters. Ma Liang walked slowly away from the palace. Never again was he forced to paint for evil purposes. Instead, he traveled across the lands of China, from one small village to another, and painted for the poor with his magic brush. China has more than 3,000 years of recorded history, and its myths, legends, folktales, and proverbs date from ancient times. China is a very large country. There are different stories told in different parts of China, and the stories tell of the way of life of the people from different areas. There are hundreds of stories from China. Stories like The King of the Monkeys and The Story of the First Kite. You can find them in your school or public libraries. Read and enjoy the tales of China and stories from all over the world. Share a story with a friend, so our tales will never end.
The preceding program was funded in part by a grant from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Urashima Taro is one of Japan's oldest and most treasured folk tales. The story has been passed from one generation to another and is still an old favorite. Today, the Japanese people try to combine the best of Western and Japanese ways of life. They eat both Japanese and Western foods, read both Japanese and Western books, and wear both Japanese and Western clothes. The people love beauty, and many take vacation trips to admire the beautiful trees and flowers of their country. They often travel in large groups, and sometimes a whole school class takes an overnight trip. Japanese children go to school and study many of the same subjects as students in the United States, but more time is spent on reading and writing because the language is so difficult. The Japanese borrowed the Chinese system of writing as well as many Chinese words. The writing includes symbols, which were once picture words. Long ago, when Japanese children asked questions, many times the elders would tell a story to explain the answer. The children often asked about the life of a prince or a princess. When they asked why they too could not live like royalty, their parents answered by telling them the story of Urashima Taro. And they began by saying, "Mukashi, Mukashi." Long, long ago, there lived a young fisherman named Urashima Taro. He lived with his old parents in a small village on the coast of Japan. Taro's father had been a fisherman before him and had taught him the skill and knowledge of fishing. But now, since his father was too old and too tired, Taro became the fisherman of the family. Everyone in the village knew Taro was a great fisherman, but he was also known for his kind heart. He would chat with the young, the old, and the lonely, bringing a little joy into their lives. One cool evening, Taro came home after a long, discouraging day. He had only caught 3 small fish. The fishing has been poor, he thought. Taro pulled his small boat onto the beach and started home. On his way, he heard some children laughing excitedly. He saw them tormenting a small sea turtle. "If you keep poking at that sea turtle, it'll die," called Taro. The children paid no attention and continued teasing the creature. Then Taro thought of a better way to deal with the mischievous children. "What if I trade you my fish for the turtle?" asked Taro. The children looked at each other, then looked at the sea turtle, and they cheered. "It's a deal." So, Taro handed the children his day's catch in exchange for the turtle's safety. The children ran off into the distance, laughing and chattering about their great bargain. Taro knelt down and gently picked up the small, shivering turtle. "I will return you to your home in the sea," said Taro. "I am sure you will be much happier there." Taro walked to the edge of the water and carefully coaxed the turtle into the gentle waves. He waited until the turtle disappeared far in the distance. And then he headed home with an empty basket. The next morning, as always, Taro rowed out to the open ocean. As he sat and waited for a fish to come, the soft waves splashed against the sides of his boat. It was very quiet and peaceful. Suddenly, he heard his name ring out in the ocean breeze. He looked around, but there were no other boats in sight. "I must have heard the cry of a seagull," thought Taro, and he went back to his fishing. Again he heard his name, this time clear as a bell. He looked around again. He saw a sea turtle swimming alongside his boat. "A sea turtle calling my name?" chuckled Taro. "Yes, Taro," answered the sea turtle, surprising the lad even more. "Thank you for saving my life yesterday." "Oh, it's you," said Taro. "You are very welcome." Then the turtle asked Taro if he had ever seen the Dragon Palace. Taro shook his head and said, "Oh, I have heard many enchanting stories of this magnificent palace at the bottom of the sea, but I, myself, have never had the pleasure of visiting this wonderful place." "Then I would like to take you there," said the turtle. Taro returned to his fishing and said, "I'd love to go, but I haven't finished my work. Besides, I don't have the strength to swim that distance." "Oh, you may ride upon my back," said the turtle. And at that moment, the turtle grew to more than twice its size. "Now won't you come with me?" asked the turtle. Taro could not resist the invitation, so he climbed onto the giant sea turtle's back, and he held onto the animal's shell. Then they dove into the deep blue sea. Strangely enough, Taro didn't grow tired as he traveled through the depths of the ocean. They swam through fields of golden seaweed until they reached a clearing. In the distance, a magnificent gate appeared. When the two travelers arrived, they could see a courtyard of colorful fish. The fish gave Taro a warm welcome and led them to a large hallway that was lined with golden columns so tall they seemed to touch the sky. The floors were tiled with rainbow shells more brilliant than the scales of a fish, and the walls were covered with coral, pearls, and precious stones. Never before had this fisherman seen such beauty and elegance. A lovely princess appeared. "Welcome to my father's palace, Urashima Taro. The sea turtle has told me of your kindness, and I'm so glad you have decided to come." Her voice echoed through the chambers like a melody. She led him to a large table covered with elegant trays of delicious foods. Such a marvelous feast for a mere fisherman, thought Taro. Court musicians filled the room with beautiful music. Taro spent many enchanted hours at the Dragon Palace. Each day brought new pleasures to behold, and every wish Taro ever had came true. He was so happy there, he forgot everything. 3 days slipped by before he even gave a thought to the home he left behind, his parents, or his life as a fisherman. One day, the princess led Taro to a large viewing room. On each wall was a window, and each looked out on the beautiful garden that surrounded the palace. "This is a timeless garden where the 4 seasons can be seen at once," said the princess. Taro looked through the east window and saw spring. Cherry trees were in full bloom, and a fresh aroma filled the air. Through the south window, Taro saw the warmth of summer. A carpet of grass with lush green trees bearing fruit that was so ripe he could almost taste its sweetness. Looking through the west window, Taro could see the trees of autumn. The warm-colored leaves tossed and floated against the sunset sky. Then a cold wind blew into the room, and Taro turned toward the north window. His heart fell, for the cold winter scene reminded him of his own village. A chill ran down his back, for now he realized how much he missed his life as a fisherman. He slowly turned to the princess and explained that his parents must be worried, and it was time to go home. The princess began to weep and begged Taro to stay, but Taro shook his head in sorrow, for he knew he had already stayed much too long. The princess handed him a shiny black lacquered box tied with a red silk cord. "Taro, you must take this box as a token, but please never open it, for it contains something very precious." Taro promised never to open the box and waved farewell as he left the palace. The turtle carried Taro back through the sea to the shore of his village. Taro walked slowly along the same shore he had walked many times before, but something seemed different. The hills and shore were the same, but there were many new houses he had never seen before. He walked towards his home, but in its place he found a strange new house. He ran to an old man who was sitting nearby and asked him, "Oji-san, what happened to the house of Urashima?" "Ah, you must be a stranger," said the old man. "My grandfather told me the legend of the young Urashima boy who was swallowed by the sea. But that was hundreds of years ago." "That cannot be possible. I am Urashima Taro." The old man looked at Taro in bewilderment. He shook his head, for he was too old and too tired to argue about such nonsense. Confused and frightened, Taro ran to the shore, for that was the only thing that did not change. He was comforted by the lonesome pounding of the surf. Perhaps the sea turtle will return, Taro thought. He waited and waited, but the turtle did not appear. There's no hope. Then he remembered the black box. Perhaps this will take me back to the palace. Although he had promised not to open it, he slowly untied the red silk cord and carefully lifted the lid. A strange cloud of mist drifted out and brushed against Taro's face, then floated away into the sea breeze. Bewildered, Taro looked into the empty box. Suddenly his face grew wrinkled. His dark black hair turned snowy white. His youthful body grew old. Now Taro understood. The box had contained his youth. Moments ago, Taro was a strong young man, but now he sat alone on the beach, a very old man. The tale of Urashima Taro is a story with many different meanings. Some say the moral of the story is never break promises. Others say the moral is that fortune and money do not always bring happiness, and that true happiness comes from the family, the home, and the heart. Still other people say there is no moral at all to this story. It's just a story which will make you feel happy and make you feel sad. Urashima Taro is one of many folk tales from Japan. You can find others in your school and public libraries, like Momotaro, the Peach Boy, and Kaguya Hime, the Luminous Princess, and Shitakiri Suzume, the Tongue-Cut Sparrow. Read and enjoy the folk tales from Japan and from all over the world. Share a story with a friend so our tales will never end.
preceding program was funded in part by a grant from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Folk tales are old, simple, and not too hard to remember. Many are stories that were told long before the invention of printing. They were passed on by word of mouth. Now, if a story is repeated enough times, and if its meaning is lasting, it may be on its way to becoming a folk tale, even if it's make-believe, like the story you'll hear today. The Flea is a story from Spain. Spain, like other countries in Western Europe, has retained many of its customs and traditions of the past. Spain is famous for its beautiful old castles, which can still be seen on the hillsides and in the older cities. Today, many of the Spanish people live in large cities like Madrid and Barcelona. They live in modern homes and apartments, and life in the city is like life anywhere else. But the country life has not changed as much. Farmers live in small villages and towns and tend their fields much as they did in the days of long ago. The people still have a king. However, he is more like our president than the king in our story. The Flea is a tale that shows that people are very much alike all over the world because we like to laugh at ourselves and at others. We cook up explanations for things we don't really understand, and sometimes we just make talk about our everyday lives. Y ahora, escuchemos. Listen to the tale of the Flea.
Había una vez un rey en España. There was once a king of Spain who loved riddles. It just delighted him to ask one that no one could answer. So, of course, he spent many hours thinking of new riddles. One day, as the king was being dressed by his servants, a flea jumped from one of the pages onto the king. The king snapped it up in his fingers and called for his chamberlain. "Chamberlain, what is this?" demanded the king. The chamberlain was very embarrassed when he saw what was in the king's hand. "Oh dear, it's a flea," he said in a low voice. "A flea?" said the king. "Does the king of Spain have fleas?" Oh, no, your highness. I must be mistaken. That cannot be a flea," begged the chamberlain. "Of course it's a flea," shouted the king. "But because it has landed on me, it is a royal flea. Now, I wonder what I should do with it." The poor chamberlain shrugged his shoulders as the king pondered over the flea. At last, the king said, "I know. We shall put this flea in a cage worthy of a royal flea, and we shall feed it royal food. I want this flea to grow as big as a cat. No, let me see, bigger than that, as big as a goat. No, even bigger than that. I want this flea to be as big as an elephant. Then I shall have the flea skinned to make a tambourine for my daughter, Belita." The king was so excited, he shook with laughter. "Don't you see, chamberlain," said the king, "this is truly a riddle worthy of a king. Every suitor that comes to ask for my daughter's hand in marriage shall be asked the riddle. The one who answers it correctly shall marry my daughter. and I think I shall name this flea Felipa." The chamberlain looked at the little flea and wondered to himself if the king had gone mad. Every day for the next 6 months, the king visited Felipa to check on her progress. Well, at the end of the first month, the flea was as big as a mouse, and the following month, as big as a cat. By the 6th month, she was as big as a goat, and the king could wait no longer. He ordered that the flea's skin be made into a tambourine. Then he had the royal dance instructor teach Belita to dance with her tambourine. And the king composed a riddle. It went like this. "Belita, Felipa, they look so well together. Belita, Felipa, if you can only answer whether. What animal is Felipa? What animal is Felipa? If you can tell about Felipa, you then can marry Belita." Well, soon the king grew tired of this business, since no one could answer the riddle. Every day more young men arrived to waste his time. So the king commanded that any suitor who could not guess the riddle would have his head cut off. Of course, all of the suitors disappeared. Belita, it seemed, was destined to live the rest of her days as an old maid. At this time, far away in the Castilian hills, there lived a shepherd. He was young and handsome, but he was poor as the poorest beggar in all of Spain. One day, the shepherd thought to himself, "I have nothing to lose. Perhaps I should try to answer the riddle." So he said goodbye to his mother and his brother. His mother gave him a small pouch filled with cheese, and his brother gave him a walking staff. And then they sent him on his way. Well, the shepherd had not gone far when he heard a tiny voice shout, "Stop! Stop!" The shepherd stopped and looked around, and there on the ground was a small black ant. "Thank you for not stepping on me," said the ant. "I am very grateful." The shepherd told the ant he was on his way to the king's palace, and the ant immediately said, "Please take me with you. I have always wanted to see the king's palace." "But I can't carry you," said the shepherd. "How about your pouch?" said the ant. "I have cheese in my pouch," answered the shepherd, "and you would get it all dirty." "Oh, but I'll wipe my feet," said the ant, "and I promise not to step on your cheese." So the shepherd put the ant in his pouch and walked on. He walked all day, and in the evening he slept by a small stream. In the morning, when he awoke, he heard a small voice calling, "Help! Help!" The shepherd looked around, and in the stream in front of him he saw a mouse thrashing about in the water. He reached into the water with his staff and saved the mouse. Thank you for saving my life," said the mouse. "How can I repay you?" "There's no need for that," said the shepherd. "I'm on my way to the king's palace to try and answer the riddle. If I can't answer it, I shall have my head cut off. And if I do answer it, I shall be rich." "Well then," said the mouse, "can you take me with you to the palace?" "But I have no place to hide you," replied the shepherd. "You have a pouch," said the mouse. "But I have my breakfast inside the pouch. There is not enough room for you too." "If you ate your breakfast now, there would be plenty of room," begged the mouse. It was true, and the shepherd was hungry. So he took out the cheese and gave a small piece to the mouse and a smaller piece to the ant. And after they ate, they continued on their way. When the shepherd arrived at the palace, he became frightened, so he sat under a tree to try to regain his courage. "What's wrong?" asked the mouse. "The thought of losing my head is not very pleasant," said the shepherd. "Come on, we will help you," said the mouse. So the shepherd went up the palace stairs and said he had come to answer the riddle. When he saw the shepherd, the chamberlain gasped. "It's not too late to turn back," he said. But the shepherd was determined and was finally presented to the king. The king took in the sad sight of the poor shepherd and said, "A shepherd's life is better than no life at all." But the shepherd insisted on answering the riddle. So Belita danced, and the king repeated his riddle. What animal is Felipa? What animal is Felipa? If you can tell about Felipa, you then may marry Belita. When the dance was over, the shepherd studied the tambourine carefully and knew right away it was not the skin of a sheep. "Can you guess what it is?" said the ant. "No, I can't," replied the shepherd sadly. "Quickly, let me out of the pouch. Maybe I can help," said the ant. The shepherd took the ant out of his pouch, and the ant crawled all over the tambourine. "There is no mistaking it," said the ant softly. "It is a flea." "Are you sure?" said the shepherd. "Absolutely," replied the ant. "Oh, stop muttering to yourself," said the king. "Quickly, answer the question." "Felipa is a flea," said the shepherd. Oh, the court was all in a flutter. "I can't marry a poor shepherd," cried Belita. "And you certainly shall not," said the king. "But you gave your word," said the shepherd. "It's just that you are so poor," said the king. "How could you possibly care for my daughter? Instead, I will grant anything you wish. Just name it, and it's yours." "Ask him to fill your pouch with gold," whispered the mouse. "Well, then, I would like to have my pouch filled with gold," said the shepherd. "That's easy enough," said the king. "Quickly, bring some gold," he commanded. The chamberlain arrived with the gold, but the mouse had gnawed a hole in the bottom of the pouch, and the gold poured right through. The chamberlain went to get more gold, and then more and more, because the pouch was never full. Finally, the shepherd said, "Enough. Now I am a rich man. I can support your daughter in any manner she wishes." And so it was the shepherd married a princess and lived a long, comfortable life. The mouse and the ant lived happily too, for the shepherd never forgot how they had helped him.
Y colorín colorado, este cuento se ha acabado. The Spanish people have a special love for friendly animals. Among their favorites are two who appeared in this story: La hormiguita, the little ant, and El ratón, the mouse. Now, a make-believe story like The Flea is a fairy tale. But other animal stories which teach people how to live are called fables. Read and enjoy folk tales from Spain and from all over the world. You can find them in your school or public libraries. Or make up a story of your own. Y colorín colorado, este cuento se ha acabado. Share a story with a friend, so our tales will never end.
The preceding program was funded in part by a grant from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
you will hear two stories. First, The Lazy Fox, and then the story of Señor Coyote and Señor Fox. Our first story, The Lazy Fox, is from Argentina. Argentina. Argentina is the second largest country in South America. The character of the fox was brought to South America in stories carried by the Spanish explorers of long ago. You see, the fox is a character often found in the folk tales of Spain. The lazy fox tries to outwit the hard-working armadillo. The armadillo is an animal found only in the American continents. So, in this story from Argentina, we'll see a blending of European and South American cultures. Señor Coyote and Señor Fox is a story from northern Mexico. In Mexico, there are many stories about Coyote, a character borrowed from Indian folklore. Coyote is very clever and can usually get the best of anyone. Y ahora escuchemos. Listen now to the tales of The Lazy Fox and Señor Coyote and Señor Fox.
Once there was a fox who was very well known for the tricks he played on everyone. This fox owned a farm, but he never did any work on it. He would lie around all day long in the coolest shade. One day he looked out at his field and wondered how he could get someone to plant and harvest it for him. All day long that armadillo works in the hot sun on that rock patch he calls a farm. Why, it should be easy to talk someone so stupid into doing all my work for me. At the end of the harvest, I'll even give him a share, but just a small one. The fox hurried over to the armadillo's farm and found him working in the field. "Ah, good morning, Armadillo. How is it going?" called the fox. The armadillo looked up and said, "Not very well. You know, this land is so rocky, I have to be very careful or I'll break my plow." "Well," said the fox, "I think I can help you." "Me?" said the armadillo. "How can you help me?" "You know, I have a very nice piece of land. If you would only plant it for me, I would ask for only a small share in payment." "Why are you so generous?" asked the armadillo. "Oh, this has been a very good year for me," said the fox, "and I've decided to let others share in my good fortune." "That's very kind of you," said the armadillo as he leaned back on his hoe. "What kind of crop do you want to plant?" "Anything you want to plant," said the fox, "and I'll let you have half of the crop." "Half?" said the armadillo. "Better yet, I'll let you have anything that grows above the ground, and I'll keep what grows below the ground." Now, the fox knew the armadillo loved potatoes, so he just assumed that would be the armadillo's choice. "That sounds fair to me," said the armadillo, and they shook hands on their agreement. The next day, the armadillo and his family got up early and went to work on the fox's field. When the fox finally got around to checking on their work, it was nearly sunset. "How is it going?" shouted the fox. "We're almost through planting," answered the armadillo, "but it looks like rain, so we'd better hurry and finish up today." The fox looked up and saw the clouds gathering, so he hurried away without asking what it was they were planting. Well, the crop grew and grew, and at last it was time to harvest the crop. The armadillo family arrived early in the morning, and by noon they had harvested a fine crop of wheat. Well, the fox didn't get up until midday, so when he went out to the field to collect his share, all that remained was the shriveled, tasteless roots. Oh, the fox was furious. He raced right over to the armadillo's house, and when he got there, he found the family eating bread. "There's been a terrible mistake," said the fox. "What's the problem?" said the armadillo. "Didn't we keep our part of the agreement?" "Yes, of course you did, but I thought..." The fox was going to say he thought they were going to plant potatoes, but he didn't. Instead, he said shrewdly, "I thought you liked roots." "I do," said the armadillo. "Well, next season I want everything that grows above the ground," said the fox. "That sounds fair to me," answered the armadillo. The fox went away with his stomach grumbling. He had planned to trick the armadillo out of the entire harvest, and now he had nothing to eat. Again, the next season, the armadillos diligently worked the field. The fox didn't bother to show up until the day of the harvest, and on that day, he didn't arrive until noon. By then, the armadillos were on their way home, and all that was left were the tops of the potato plants the armadillo had planted. "Come back!" hollered the fox. "I think you're trying to trick me." "But that's what we agreed, isn't it?" replied the armadillo. "You never think of me when you plant," said the fox. "Next season, I want the tops as well as what grows under the soil. You can have all that grows in the middle." "Well, I don't know," said the armadillo. "I think it's only fair. I didn't get any of the first two crops," demanded the fox. The armadillo was silent for a moment and then said, "All right, I think it's fair too." The fox went away with his stomach grumbling again. He looked at his shadow and thought, "Oh, how thin I'm getting." But this time he felt certain there was no way the armadillo could get any of the crop, and at least that made him feel a little better. The next harvest, the fox arrived early in the morning to find the armadillo had planted corn. The crop was large, and the ears were especially succulent, but they grew right in the middle of the plant. "You have tricked me again," said the fox. "How could that be?" said the armadillo. "We gave you just what you asked for." The hungry fox watched the armadillo haul away the corn harvest. "That's the last time I'm going to let you use my fields," he shouted. The armadillo didn't say anything. He just walked away slowly, because not only was the crop heavy, but he had put on a lot of weight over the last 3 seasons. Now, on another day, in a desert not too far away, the coyote was looking for something to eat. He saw a large mesa in the distance, and he thought he might find a small animal sleeping in the shade of the cliff. When he arrived by the edge of this great cliff, he began looking around. But instead of the tasty little animal, he found his old enemy, the fox, sleeping as usual. "Aha! Here's my chance to get that fox," thought the coyote. The fox, however, never sleeps like other animals. He sleeps with one eye open. So when he saw his enemy, the coyote, sneaking up on him, the fox jumped to his feet and began pushing hard against the rock cliff. "Help me!" he shouted at the coyote. "Please help me, or this cliff will fall on us and kill us both." The coyote was a bit confused. He looked at the fox, straining and pushing against the rock cliff like his life depended on it. "See for yourself," said the fox. "The cliff is falling." The coyote looked up to the top of the cliff, and sure enough, it looked as if it were going to fall over on him. He jumped to the cliff wall next to the fox and began pushing with all his might. "Whew, that certainly was close," said the fox. "I'd certainly be dead if you hadn't come along." The coyote looked up again and saw that it was still falling, so he pushed very hard, so hard that he was kicking up ground with his feet. "We're doomed," said the fox sadly. "We will probably die here together." "No, we won't," said the coyote. "Help will come soon enough." "No, we are the only ones here, and no one ever comes this way." The coyote looked up only to scare himself again and pushed even harder against the cliff. "I've got an idea," perked up the fox. "There may be a way out of this." "What's that?" grunted the coyote. I'll go get help, and you stay here and hold up this cliff, said the fox. Why don't you hold up the cliff, and I'll go for help, asked the coyote. Well, you are more than twice as strong as I am and can surely hold it up by yourself. I'll be back in just a few minutes. All right, replied the coyote, but hurry. Push harder, harder, called the fox as he ran away. The coyote pushed and pushed. His arms and legs hurt so badly he thought they would break. A few minutes became an hour became 2. The coyote pushed so hard he began to dig a hole in the ground with his feet. The day passed, the sun set, night came. Oh, it was cold and dark. The coyote shivered and called out for the fox, but the fox didn't come. When the sun finally rose, he was so tired he was quivering. I can't last much longer, he gasped. Tears were rolling down his face. This is the end, he thought. I might as well try to make a run for it, because if I stay, I will die anyway. He gave one last shove, and with all the strength he had left, he ran away from the cliff. When he looked back, he saw the mesa still standing. He blinked. He rubbed his eyes. It wasn't going to fall. Not now, not in 100 years. He had been tricked. The fox was nowhere to be found. He was napping in some dark, cool place far away.
Y colorín colorado, este cuento se ha acabado. These are just 2 stories which have been translated from Spanish. There are hundreds of others. You can find stories from Mexico and Argentina and from all over the world in your school or public libraries. Read and enjoy the folk tales of the world. Y colorín colorado, este cuento se ha acabado. Share a story with a friend so our tales will never end.
The preceding program was funded in part by a grant from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Today's story, the tale of the magic boy Tepoztlán, was told by the Indians who built their cities in the valleys of ancient Mexico. In Mexico, there are 2 huge mountain ranges, the Sierra Madre Occidental and the Sierra Madre Oriental. It was here that the Azteca, the Mixteca, the Tolteca, and other Indians built their magnificent cities, all of stone. Now, since the mountains surrounding the city were always covered by clouds, the people believed that the mountaintops must be the home of the gods. Stories of the gods and their magic are told in Mexico even today, in the modern cities as well as in the smaller villages. Y ahora escuchemos. Listen now to the tale of Tepoztlán. A long, long time ago, before anyone who is alive today can remember, there lived a little boy named Tepoztlán. He lived with an old fisherman and his wife in a house by the river. Tepoztlán thought the old fisherman and his wife were his real parents, but his real father was a god who lived in a giant volcano high above the clouds. In those days, the gods had their jobs to do. They controlled the winds and made the rain fall at the right time so that the crops would grow. The gods discovered many things which they taught to the people. But one of the gods got tired of living in the volcano and decided it would be nice to have a wife and child. So he came down from the fiery volcano to be with people. While stopping by a stream, he saw a beautiful girl picking flowers. And right away, they fell in love. So he gave her a green stone. And with that, they were married. After a while, she gave birth to a son. Now one day, the god decided he had to return to his mountain to make the rain fall and control the winds. This made his wife very sad, because the laws of her people would not allow a mother to keep a fatherless child. Well, before anyone could take away her child, she put him into a box, and around Tepoztlán's neck, she tied the smooth green stone given to her by the god, and she let him float down the river. And that is how the fisherman and his wife came to find the little baby boy. The box floated down the river and stopped in the shallow water in front of their house. Well, the fisherman and his wife were very happy, for they had wanted children for a long time and couldn't have any. "What shall we call him?" said the fisherman. His wife said, "Well, he has a green stone around his neck. You know, it reminds me of the green stones brought down from the mountains." "Then we shall call him Tepoztlán, the boy from the mountains." So that's how he got his name. Tepoztlán grew up strong and happy with his new parents. They loved him very much, and they took very good care of him. When Tepoztlán was 7 years old, the fisherman made him a bow with little arrows to go with it. "Now I will bring home all the food, and you can stay home and rest," said Tepoztlán. The old fisherman laughed. "You are just a little boy," he said. "But I can shoot anything I want," answered Tepoztlán. "All right," said the fisherman. "Shoot that quail over there." Well, Tepoztlán picked up his bow and placed an arrow to the string. He let the arrow fly in the wrong direction, but the arrow turned around in flight and killed the quail. "There must be a wind," said the old man. "That could never happen twice. See that wild turkey on that tree? Let's see if you can hit him." The old man knew it was impossible to shoot the turkey at such a long distance. But Tepoztlán fitted an arrow to the bow and again shot it in the wrong direction. Again the arrow turned and the turkey fell dead. Well, from that day on, Tepoztlán did all the hunting, and the old fisherman and his wife stayed at home. He left before sunrise each day and returned just after sunset. And when the fisherman's wife asked him, "Tepoztlán, what do you do all day?" Tepoztlán would reply, "I have many things to do." Well, one day, Tepoztlán was walking along a trail when he heard some men talking about an evil giant that lived in the woods. The giant had to be fed a human being every spring. Each year, he went to a new village and demanded that someone be handed over to him, or he would kill everyone in the entire village. Well, the people were very scared of the giant, so they always obeyed him and selected someone to be eaten. Deposton also learned that this year it was the old fisherman's village's turn to supply a human being for the giant. When he arrived home, the old fisherman was very sad. There were only 3 people he could send: himself, his wife, or Deposton. Well, so of course he decided to go himself. The old fisherman did not tell Deposton about his decision. But when the people arrived to take him away, Deposton knew what they were there for. "I won't let you take him away," said Deposton to the people. "He's very old, and he won't make a good meal. I'm young and tender, and will be much more satisfying to a hungry giant." The old fisherman would not hear of it. "You are young and have your life before you. I am old. I will die happy knowing you are well." "But nothing will happen to me if I go," said Deposton. He begged and begged the old man to believe him. Finally, the fisherman agreed and told him he could go. Well, Deposton immediately began to build a fire by the river. "Watch this fire," he told the fisherman. "As long as you see white smoke, you will know I am all right. But if the smoke turns gray, it will mean I am in danger. And if it turns black, it will mean I am dead." He assured the old man and his wife that he would return, and he went off with the people. Now, on the way to the giant, Deposton stopped and picked up shiny black stones, the kind used to make arrowheads and knives. His pockets were filled with them by the time they reached the giant's castle. "What is this?" said the giant. "How am I to feed on such a tiny morsel?" Oh, the giant was huge. He was taller than 10 men standing on top of each other. "You bring me another," roared the giant. "I am little, but I taste very good," said Deposton. "Why don't you try me and see?" So the people brought in a large pot of boiling water, and Deposton very willingly hopped in. The people then put the lid on the pot and went away. The giant went to sleep as his meal cooked. A little later, the giant woke up and said, "Oh, I'm hungry. The boy is small. He must be cooked by now." But instead of a tasty little boy, there was a giant black leopard in the pot. The giant quickly put the lid back on the pot and went back to sleep. When he woke up later, he was hungrier than before. But this time, the giant very carefully lifted the lid. Well, inside the pot, there was a huge snake. The snake hissed at the giant. So the giant put the lid back on the pot and went back to sleep. The next time the giant woke up, he was so hungry he would eat anything. He didn't care what it was. He went over to the pot, took off the lid, and there was the little boy smiling at the giant. Well, this made the giant really angry. So he picked up the pot and swallowed all of its contents in one gulp. At that very moment, the smoke from the fisherman's fire turned from white to gray. Oh, the old woman cried, and the old fisherman moaned. "He's only a little boy. I shouldn't have let him go." Oh, but Deposton was all right. You see, the giant had swallowed him whole, and he was sitting in the giant's stomach. Deposton reached into his pocket and took out the stones he had collected along the way. He took 2 of them and hit them together so hard they broke in half. The edge of each one of the stones was as sharp as a razor. Devilstone began to cut himself out of the giant's stomach. He cut and cut and cut. Oh, the giant groaned. I think I have heartburn. And Devilstone kept on cutting and cutting. Well, by now, the hole was so large he could see daylight. Finally, he cut right through to the outside. Devilstone hopped out of the giant, and all the people standing around cheered. At that moment, the smoke at the fisherman's fire, it turned from gray to white. Devilstone then moved into the giant's palace and was soon crowned king. After a while, he learned about his real father, the god, and so he went to live with him. Some say that he has returned and lives with the people, except no one knows who he is, because he looks just like an ordinary person. Y colorín colorado, este cuento se ha acabado. This story of Devilstone is just one of the many tales about the magic boy of the mountains. You can find others in your school or public library. Stories like how Devilstone hung the bells and the magic grocery store. Read and enjoy other stories from Mexico and all over the world. Y colorín colorado, este cuento se ha acabado. Share a story with a friend so our tales will never end.
The preceding program was funded in part by a grant from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Our story today, The Tiger and the Rabbit, comes from Puerto Rico, an island in the Caribbean Sea. Puerto Rico is a Spanish name, which means rich port. Puerto Rico is a territory of the United States of America, and its people are United States citizens, but they have their own government. Now, the first people to live here were the Indians, called Arawaks. Later, Spaniards and Africans settled on the island. So today, Puerto Rico reflects the contributions of all three cultures. The Spanish heritage of Puerto Rico is seen in the language and customs of its people. Spanish is the main language, although many Puerto Ricans also speak English. The Tiger and the Rabbit is an animal story, and people everywhere love stories about animals. Stories from Spain tell about small animals that defeat mighty ones, and a little animal may be a mouse or an ant. But in Central America, it's often the rabbit. You see, the character of the rabbit was brought to Puerto Rico in the African tales of long ago. Y ahora, escuchemos. Listen now to the tale of the tiger and the rabbit.
Hace mucho tiempo. Long, long ago, all the animals were friends and lived at peace with one another. That is, except for the tiger. The tiger liked to eat small animals, and his favorite meal was the rabbit. The rabbit, for this reason, became very clever and quick-witted. In fact, the rabbit thought the tiger was a stupid, clumsy fool. Even so, he always tried to stay out of the tiger's way. One day, the rabbit was playing his guitar under the shade of a tree. Along came the tiger and creeped up on the rabbit. Well, before the rabbit could get away, the tiger jumped and grabbed him. "Aha! Now I've caught you," said the tiger. The little rabbit pretended not to be scared and answered calmly, "Ah, well, Tiger, you've come along at the right time. I was just sitting here playing my guitar and thinking about the best way to die. And if you knew what was going to happen, you would not care to live either." "What's going to happen?" asked the tiger. "Oh, hurry, eat me and be done with it," said the rabbit. "You will need all the strength you can get." "But what's going to happen?" demanded the tiger. "You mean you haven't heard?" said the rabbit. "There's a hurricane coming, and it's worse than any we've ever had. They say that all the animals will be washed away." "Oh, that's terrible," cried the tiger. "What am I going to do?" "For you there's hope," said the rabbit. "You can tie yourself to a good strong tree, but for me it's hopeless." "Tie myself to a tree?" whimpered the tiger. "Sure, this one will do. It's withstood several hurricanes and will certainly stand another." "Oh, thank you. Thank you for helping me," said the tiger. "I don't want to be washed away." So the rabbit tied the tiger to the tree. Then he climbed up the tree to keep his eye on the tiger. Just then, a small herd of goats came walking down the road. When they first saw the tiger, they were frightened. But then they noticed the tiger was tied to the tree, and they laughed and laughed. "You wouldn't be laughing if you knew what was going to happen," said the tiger. "Oh, really? What's going to happen?" asked the goats. "A hurricane is coming, and it's going to wash all of us away." "A hurricane?" said the goats. "We haven't heard of a hurricane." The goats talked among themselves, and finally said to the tiger, "We have come from the mountains and across the hills, and no one has mentioned such news. There's no hurricane coming." The tiger knew at once he had been tricked, and the sight of the fat little goats made him even more angry because he was hungry. "Well then, why don't you untie me?" said the tiger. But the goats just laughed and ran away. Well, what could be funnier than a tiger tied to a tree? Oh, the tiger struggled and struggled, but he only got more and more tangled. In a while, a monkey came by and saw the tiger tangled up in the rope. He called all his friends to come and see. "What are you looking at?" said the angry tiger. "You look very funny," said the monkey. "Why are you all tangled up in that rope?" "I've been trapped by a very evil creature. Let me go, and I'll tell you who it was so he won't catch you." "Oh, no. If I let you go, you will eat us up," said the monkey. "I've never eaten a monkey," lied the tiger. "I promise I won't eat you." Oh, the monkeys believed him and began to chew on the ropes. As soon as the tiger's paw was free, he grabbed the monkey. He was about to eat him when the rabbit called from above, "That's not the way to eat a monkey." "What do you mean?" said the tiger. The way to eat a monkey is to throw him in the air and catch him in your mouth, said the rabbit. Oh, anybody can do that, said the tiger as he threw the monkey in the air. Well, the monkey grabbed onto a branch, while the rabbit took his guitar and dropped it into the tiger's mouth. The poor tiger ran off into the forest, coughing and choking. Oh, the tiger was furious that he had been tricked again. He swore he would eat the rabbit if it was the last thing he did. Well, then one day he saw the rabbit carrying some cheese near a river. "This is my chance. Now I'm going to eat you," he said. "Yes," said the rabbit, "but first taste this fine cheese." Where did you get this?" said the tiger. "Oh, there's lots of it at the bottom of the river. If you tie a rock to your body, it will help you sink. There is much more down there than I alone can carry." More cheese," said the tiger. "I must have more." And he ran off to look for some rocks. "Leave some for me," called the rabbit. But the tiger had already tied several large rocks to his legs and jumped right into the water. The tiger sank down, down, down into the river and looked around, but nowhere did he see any cheese. Soon he ran out of air and started to struggle to get to the surface, but the rocks kept him down. Oh, he thrashed and pulled. Poor tiger, he swallowed water and choked. Finally, the tiger grabbed onto a branch, and he pulled himself to the surface. As he lay on the riverbank, he swore again and again, "Someday I'll eat that rabbit. Someday I'll eat that rabbit." A long time passed, and the rabbit stayed clear of the tiger. But one day, the rabbit was talking with the fox. "The tiger is the smartest animal in the world," said the fox. The rabbit only laughed. "The tiger is a fool," he said. "The tiger is so dumb, he would even let me ride him like a horse." "I don't believe that," said the fox. "I'll prove it to you," answered the rabbit. "I'll come by your house and make the tiger rear up just like a horse." Well, one Sunday, Fox was entertaining Tiger at his house. The two ate until they were full and satisfied. "What we need is some music," said the fox. The tiger agreed. "Since you provided this excellent feast, I'm going to get the best guitar player in the area to come and play for us." Well, the best guitar player in the area just happened to be the rabbit. The tiger, having forgotten about his promise to eat the rabbit, went to get him to play his guitar for them. Well, when the rabbit saw the tiger at his door, he hid under his bed. "Rabbit, rabbit," called the tiger, "my friend the fox is having a feast, and we need the best guitar player in the area to play for us." The rabbit called back in a very weak voice, "I cannot come out. I'm very sick." "But you must come. I've given my word to the fox. Besides, I'm so full right now I couldn't eat you if I tried. Please, you must come." Well, the rabbit thought of a way to prove to the fox what a fool the tiger really was. He wrapped a handkerchief around his head and used a stick as a cane. He opened the door and moaned, "I'm so sick. I can't walk." "Come along," said the tiger. "I'll carry you on my back." The rabbit tried to crawl onto the tiger's back, but he immediately fell off. "Oh, this won't do," said the rabbit. "I can't ride on your back unless I have a blanket." "Certainly," said the tiger. "Hurry, the fox is waiting." The rabbit went into his house and came out with a blanket. But no sooner had he climbed on than he fell off again. "I'm afraid this won't do either," he said. "I will need a small saddle. I think I have one someplace." "All right, but hurry," said the tiger. He put a bridle on the tiger, fixed on the saddle, put spurs on himself and climbed onto the tiger with his guitar. "I'm ready," he said at last. And with his hands on the reins, the rabbit and the tiger trotted off to the fox's house. When they arrived, the rabbit called to the fox, "Come and see your friend." And he put his spurs into the tiger's side and made him rear like a horse. As the tiger ran off into the forest, the fox thought to himself, "That tiger is a fool. The rabbit was right." Later that day, the tiger and the rabbit returned to the fox's house and rejoined the feast. The rabbit played his guitar beautifully. The tiger finally realized how smart the rabbit really was. And from that day, they have been good friends. Until, of course, when the tiger gets hungry again.
Y colorín colorado, este cuento se ha acabado. This was one of the stories from a book called The Tiger and the Rabbit and Other Tales, collected by Pura Belpré. You can find it in your school or public library. Read the tale of Nangato the cat and La Hormiguita the little ant. Look for these tales from Puerto Rico and stories from all over the world. Y colorín colorado, este cuento se ha acabado. Share a story with a friend so our tales will never end.
The preceding program was funded in part by a grant from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Africa is a land of many countries, towns, villages, and tribes. A land of varied customs, dress, and languages. Therefore, a land of many people. Come with me along Africa's west coast to Nigeria, on the Gulf of Guinea, where more pure Negroid people live than anywhere else in the world. Come to Ghana, where the Ashanti live. Long ago, the Ashanti came to this land from somewhere farther north, no one really knows where. They cleared and planted the earth and hunted the wild game of the forest. Among the Ashanti were fine artists and craftsmen, weavers, metalsmiths, wood carvers, and drum makers. They had their poets, singers, and storytellers. The storytellers passed on the legends of the migration of their ancestors, stories of their heroes, stories of how the world began and how certain customs came to be. Today, life among the Ashanti is changing, as life everywhere is changing. The king of Ashanti lives in a modern house and works in an office much like our president. But the old traditions and customs are not forgotten. Even today in the Ashanti villages, Children gather at night to hear their favorite stories. Most are about the spider. The Ashanti tribe is said to have created the tales of Kwaku Ananse, a cunning spider who appears as Spider the animal or Spider the man. He is at the same time the wisest and most stupid of all creatures, sometimes a hero and sometimes a smart aleck whose schemes don't always work out. All tales are called Ananseum, in honor of the spider Ananse. But wait, come with me and hear how such a strange thing came to be. Listen, hear the storyteller's call. Come, 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 listen to the time when there were no stories on earth to hear. Come listen, listen and learn.
Once, so they say, a long, long time ago, there were no stories on the earth to hear. All of the stories belonged to Niame. Niame was the sky god. He kept the stories in a golden box on his royal throne. Now Ananse, the Spider-Man, thought it would be nice to have some stories to tell. So he decided to visit the sky god, Niame. He spun a magic web and climbed up, 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 up into the sky until he reached the home of the sky god. When Niame, the sky god, heard what Ananse wanted, he laughed. He said to Ananse, "If you want my stories, there is a price you must pay. You must bring me Osebo, the leopard of the terrible teeth. And you must bring me Mboro, the hornet who stings like fire. And last of all, you must bring me Mwatia, the fairy whom men never see." Ananse bowed and said to Niame, "I shall gladly pay your price. I shall bring you Osebo, the leopard of the terrible teeth, Mboro, the hornet who stings like fire, and even Mwatia, the fairy whom men never see." Again the sky god laughed. He thought, "How can Ananse pay my price? He is a weak old man and is so small, so small, so small." Ananse left the sky god and began his journey back to earth to find the things that the sky god demanded. He climbed down, 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 down his web. The next day, Ananse was walking along a jungle path, and he came face to face with Osebo, the leopard of the terrible teeth. "Hello, Ananse," said the leopard. "You are just in time to be my lunch." Ananse said, "As for that, what will happen will happen. But first, why don't we play the binding game?" Now the leopard, who liked to play games, asked, "How do you play this game?" "With vine ropes," explained Ananse. "I will tie you up foot to foot, then I will untie you, and then it's your turn, and you can tie me up." "Very well," growled the leopard. He planned to eat Ananse as soon as it was his turn to tie him up. So Ananse tied up the leopard, foot to foot to foot to foot, with the vine ropes. Then he said, "Now, Osebo, you are ready to meet the sky god." Ananse found a tall tree, and then he hung the leopard from a branch. The angry leopard watched as Ananse cut a banana leaf from a banana tree and filled a gourd with water. Ananse crept through the tall grass very softly, very softly, very softly, until he came to the nest of Mboro, the hornet who stings like fire. Ananse held the banana leaf over his head like an umbrella. He poured some of the water from the gourd over his own head. He poured the rest over the hornet's nest and cried, "It's raining! It's raining! It's raining! Would you like to fly into my gourd so that the rain will not tatter your wings?" "Thank you very much! Oh, thank you very much!" hummed the hornets and flew into the gourd. Ananse quickly put the stopper in the mouth of the gourd. "Now, Mboro, you are ready to meet the sky god," said Ananse, as he hung the gourd full of hornets on the tree next to the leopard. Next, Ananse carved a little wooden doll holding a bowl. He carefully covered the doll from top to bottom with sticky tree gum. Then he filled the doll's bowl with pounded yams. He set the little doll at the foot of a flamboyant tree where fairies like to dance. Ananse tied one end of a vine around the doll's head, and, holding the other end in his hand, he hid behind a bush. In a little while, Mwatia, the fairy whom men never see, came dancing, dancing, dancing to the foot of the flamboyant tree. There she saw the doll holding the bowl of yams. Mwatia said, "Little gum baby, I am hungry. May I eat some of your yams?" Ananse pulled the vine from his hiding place so that the doll seemed to nod its head. So the fairy took the bowl from the doll, and she ate all of the yams. "Thank you, little gum baby," said the fairy. But the doll did not answer. "Don't you answer when I thank you?" asked the angry fairy. Of course, the doll did not move. "Little gum baby, I'll slap your face unless you answer me," shouted the fairy. But the wooden doll remained silent. So the fairy slapped the doll. Pow! Her hand stuck to the doll's sticky cheek. "Let go of my hand or I'll slap you again!" Pow! She slapped the doll's face with her other hand. Now the fairy was stuck to the doll with both hands, and she was furious. Then she pushed against the doll with her feet, and they also stuck fast. Now Anansi came out of his hiding place. "You, Mwatia, are ready to meet the sky god." And he carried her to the tree where the leopard and the hornets were waiting. Then Ananse spun a web around the leopard and around the hornets and around the fairy. He spun and spun until he had them all in a bundle. Then he began to spin a web up to the sky. He pulled up his captives behind him and climbed and climbed and climbed his web to the home of the sky god, Niame. When he arrived, he placed the bundle at the feet of the sky god. "Niame, god of the blue sky, here is the price for your stories," said Ananse as he bowed. Niame, the sky god, called together all the nobles of his court and said to them in a loud voice, "Hear see! Hear see! Little Ananse, the Spider-Man, he has paid me the price I asked for my stories. From this day on," proclaimed the happy sky god, "my stories belong to Ananse, the Spider-Man, and shall be called Spider Stories." "Hooray! Hooray! Hooray!" shouted the assembled nobles. Ananse the Spider-Man took the golden box of stories and climbed down, down, down his web back to the earth, to the people of his village. And when Ananse opened the box, all of the stories, including this one, scattered to all the four corners of the world.
Now we know why it is said that Anansi gave us all our stories. When Africans came to the New World as slaves or as free men, they brought along their Anansi tales. Sometimes the places and characters were changed, but the meanings of the stories remained the same. Today there are many stories about Anansi. They are told in Africa, the West Indies, in South and Central America, and of course in the United States. Anansi the spider has several different names, and the stories may be called Anansi stories, or stories of Aunt Nancy or Sister Nancy. Go, read. Read and share the tales of Anansi.
Today's story is an old favorite. It's called Burr Rabbit and the Tar Baby. The Tar Baby is considered part of the traditional folklore of the United States, but the story originally came from Africa. When black American slaves were first brought from Africa to the southern United States, they brought with them the memories of Africa and the way they used to live. They brought the richness of the tales and the legends of their people. In African tales, the animal characters were the rabbit, Wakaima, the spider, Anansi, and the tortoise and the hare. Our friend Burr Rabbit is very similar to the rabbit Wakaima. Burr Rabbit, like Wakaima, appears to be frightened and helpless, but he's really very smart. He's a practical joker and almost always outsmarts the bigger and stronger animals. Because he was so quick-witted, Burr Rabbit was a favorite story character among the black slaves. The stories of his cunning gave them hope that they too might someday be free. The Burr Rabbit stories were collected by Joel Chandler Harris, and the storyteller who gave him these stories was Uncle Remus, a black American slave. So let's hear the story of the Tar Baby, and you'll get the feeling of the people of Africa and the southern plantation in America when you hear the storyteller's call. Come, come, come and listen to the tales of Uncle Remus. Come listen. Listen and learn.
One day, Brer Fox and Brer Bear was sitting in the woods talking about Brer Rabbit. And they agreed that he was getting much too bossy and was sticking his nose into everyone's business. "Brer Rabbit's getting much too biggity," said Brer Bear to Brer Fox. "Yeah, someday I'm gonna catch Brer Rabbit and pull out his mustaches. Prip, prop, said Brer Fox. "Someday I'm gonna catch Brer Rabbit and knock his head clean off. Blim, blam, blim, blam," said Brer Bear. Then Brer Fox thought of an idea. Now he was gonna catch Brer Rabbit, and he started to work right away. He got some tar and made it into the shape of a tar baby, with arms, legs, a stomach, and a head. To make the tar baby look real, he pulled some hair from Brer Bear's back and stuck them into the tar baby's head. Then he took Brer Bear's yellow hat and his own blue coat and put them on the tar baby. "Come on now, Brer Bear, help me carry this tar baby down to their big road where that rabbit's sure to come by." And they put the tar baby under a tree by the side of the road. Then they hid in the bushes and waited for Brer Rabbit to come by. Well, it wasn't long before Brer Rabbit came hopping down the road, just whistling. Suddenly, he spotted the tar baby. "Howdy," said Brer Rabbit. The tar baby didn't say anything. Brer Fox and Brer Bear watched from the bushes. Brer Rabbit waited for an answer. Then he said louder, "What's the matter with you? I said howdy do. Is you deaf? Now if you is, I can holler louder." The tar baby said nothing. Then Brer Rabbit yelled real loud, "Where is your politeness? Ain't you gonna say howdy do like respectable folks say when they meet up on the road?" The tar baby said nothing, while Brer Fox and Brer Bear hid in the bushes. Brer Rabbit got real mad. "If you don't say howdy do by the time I count 3, I'm going to blip you in the nose." Brer Rabbit counted. 1, 2, 3. But still the tar baby said nothing. So he drew back his right fist and pow! Hit the tar baby right in the nose. But his fist stuck in the tar and he couldn't pull it loose. Brer Rabbit got madder. "Let go of my fist," he howled. And he drew back his other fist and again he hit the tar baby in the nose. This fist stuck in the tar too, and he couldn't get either hand loose. The tar baby said nothing, and Brer Fox and Brer Bear started to laugh in the bushes. "If you don't let go of my fist," yelled Brer Rabbit, "I'm going to kick your teeth right out your mouth." Well, Brer Rabbit pulled back one foot and hit the tar baby, and his foot stuck. So he kicked with his other foot and kicked the tar baby again. Now both feet were stuck in the tar. "If you don't let go of my foot, if you don't let go of my foot," screamed Brer Rabbit to the tar baby, "I'm going to butt you with my head till you ain't got a breath left in your body." Brer Rabbit butted the tar baby with his head. But his head got stuck in the tar. Now he was completely stuck, head, feet, and fist. And the harder he tried to get unstuck, the more stuck he got. Now Brer Fox and Brer Bear came out of the bushes feeling very good, and they danced around Brer Rabbit. "We sure catched you this time, Brer Rabbit," said Brer Bear. "Yeah, you better say your prayers, Brer Rabbit, 'cause this time is the very last day of your life." Now Brer Rabbit was starting to tremble. He was in big trouble, but he set his mind to work to figure out how he could get out of this mess. Brer Fox and Brer Bear were so happy, and now they were trying to figure out what to do with Brer Rabbit. Brer Bear wanted to knock his head clean off. Brer Fox wanted to make him suffer. "Brer Rabbit," he said, "you been sticking your head into my business for years, but now I got you, and I'm gonna fix up a big fire, and when it's good and hot, I'm going to drop you in and roast you." Brer Rabbit wasn't scared anymore. He had an idea how he could get loose, but he talked like he was very scared. "I don't care what you do with me," he said. "Just don't fling me over these bushes into that there briar patch. Just as hot as you please, you can roast me, but don't fling me into that there briar patch." Brer Bear got to thinking. If they roasted Brer Rabbit, that would mean that they'd have to go gather wood for the fire, and that meant work. Brer Fox said, "Well then, Brer Rabbit, I'm going to hang you." "Well, hang me just as high as you please," said Brer Rabbit to Brer Fox. "But please don't fling me in that there briar patch." Now Brer Bear started thinking again. Now to hang Brer Rabbit, they'd have to get a long rope. So Brer Fox decided to drown Brer Rabbit. "Well, drown me just as deep as you please," said Brer Rabbit. "But just please don't fling me in that there briar patch." "It's gonna be a whole lot of trouble to drown Brer Rabbit," said Brer Bear. "First we had to carry him all the way down to the river." "Well, that's so," said Brer Fox. "Well, Brer Rabbit, I expect the best way here to skin you. Come on, Brer Bear, let's get started." "Skin me? Well, skin me," said Brer Rabbit. "Pull out my ears and snatch off my legs. You can chop off my tail, but please, Brer Fox and Brer Bear, don't fling me in that there briar patch." Now, Brother Bear started to grumble. And he told Brer Fox that Brer Rabbit wasn't scared of being skinned, so it wouldn't be much fun to skin him. "You sure is scared of that briar patch," said Brer Fox. "That's just where he gonna go. This is the end of you, Brer Rabbit." Brer Fox pulled Brer Rabbit from the tar baby and threw him into the middle of the briar patch. There was a lot of noise and activity when Brer Rabbit landed in the briar patch. He was yelling and carrying on, making a real big ruckus. After quite a time, the noise started to quiet down, with only an occasional tired yell. Brer Fox and Brer Bear had been listening and smiling, and they shook hands and slapped each other on the back. "Brer Rabbit ain't gonna be too sassy no more," said Brer Fox. "Brer Rabbit ain't gonna be too bossy no more," said Brother Bear. "Brer Rabbit ain't going to do nothing no more," said Brother Fox and Brother Bear. "This is the end of Brer Rabbit. Brer Rabbit is dead." Just then, Brer Fox and Brer Bear heard a lot of noise among the leaves at the other end of the briar patch. And who do they see come scrambling out of the bushes? None other than Brer Rabbit. He was singing and whistling and combing the last bit of tar out of his mustache with a piece of briar brush. "Howdy, Brer Fox and Brer Bear," he yelled. "I told you not to fling me in that there briar patch. That's the place in all this world I love the very best. That briar patch is the place where I was born." And with that, Brer Rabbit hopped off down the road, laughing so hard he couldn't laugh anymore.
Now that's a smart rabbit. And there are many more stories of Brer Rabbit, Brer Bear, Brer Fox, and all their friends, all collected by Joel Chandler Harris. So go, read, and share the tales of Uncle Remus. Go read read and learn.
The preceding program was funded in part by a grant from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Our stories today come from West Africa, from Ghana, where the Ashanti people lived. Long ago, the Ashanti came to Ghana from somewhere farther north. They cleared and planted the land and hunted wild game of the forest. Among the early Ashanti were fine craftsmen, wood carvers, and weavers. The Ashanti of the past and the village people of today build their dome-shaped houses in a circle, using slender poles covered with woven grass reeds. Boys and girls help thatch the little houses with sheaves of grass cut in short lengths. And at night, when the moon is high in the sky and all the day's work is done, the men, women, and children of all ages leave their round houses and go to an open space in the middle of the village. There, they gather around a cozy fire and call for the storyteller, the one who tells the stories the best. West Africa is rich in a number of different kinds of stories it's created. The folk tales of the Ashanti tribe are particularly noted for their humor. And it was the Ashanti who created the stories of Kwaku and Nancy, the cunning spider. And Nancy is one of the favorite West African characters. Sometimes he's a spider, and other times he appears as a man. He's at the same time both very wise and very foolish. And Nancy loves to eat, but he hates to work. And this often gets him into trouble. and he usually has to use his cleverness to get himself out of it. In our first story, we'll learn why spiders have a thin, thin middle. And in the second story, we'll see what happens when Anansi tries to get a free meal from the turtle. So imagine yourself in West Africa on the Gulf of Guinea. The night is high, and the moon is high in the sky. It's a time for storytelling. So gather around and hear. Hear the storyteller's call. Come. Come. Come listen to the time when the spider was fat and had no fin. Come listen to the time when the turtle outsmarted Anansi. Come listen. Listen. Listen and learn.
Early one morning, Anansi was walking through the forest when he noticed a very pleasant smell. He wrinkled his nose and sniffed the wind first. First this way, then that. Goodness me, it is food. He'd almost forgotten. Today was the festival of the harvest, and every village in the forest was preparing a feast. People were cooking yams and cassava and chicken with peanut-flavored sauce, and there would be fish and peppers and rice boiling in great pots. Anansi jumped for joy and smacked his lips. His eyes sparkled, and he smiled brightly as he thought of the good-tasting food. Now, Anansi had not done any work to deserve such a feast, so no one had invited him to come and eat. All he did was play in the sun and sleep. Anansi was right in the middle of a path between two villages, and each village was having a feast. How lucky for me, thought Anansi. But he didn't know which feast to go to, so he sat down to think about it. He thought for a long time. Finally, he decided, I shall go to both of them. Anansi was so pleased with himself that he did a little dance. Now, how could he know when the food was ready? He sat down to think some more. When he thought of a plan, he did another dance because he was so brilliant. With his plan in mind, Anansi did two things. First, he called his eldest son, Kuma. He took a long rope and tied one end around his middle and gave the other end to his son. Take this rope to the villages on the east, and when the food is ready, give the rope a hard pull, and then I'll know that it's time to come and eat, he said to Kuma. Then Anansi called his youngest son, Kwaku, and took another long rope, tied it around his middle just below the first one. Kwaku, he said, now you take this rope to the village on the west, and when the food is cooked, pull very, very hard, and then I'll come and eat my fill. Well, you can imagine what happened. The people in both villages had dinner at the same time. Of course, both of Anansi's sons pulled on the ropes at the same time. The ropes got tighter and tighter, and poor greedy Anansi was caught right in the middle. He could neither go east or west. Kuma and Kwaku couldn't understand why their father didn't come, and both pulled harder and harder. The rope squeezed tighter and tighter and tighter, and his middle got thinner and thinner and thinner. Kuma and Kwaku waited until all the food was eaten. Then they came to look for their father. When they found him, he looked very different. His waistline was thinner, thinner than a needle. Anansi never grew fat again. From that time on, he would have a big body and a tiny waist in between. Many months later, when it was almost time for the sun to sink in its resting place, Turtle, tired and dusty from hours of wandering, came to Anansi's house in the middle of a clearing in the woods. Turtle was hungry, and the smell of freshly cooked fish and yams drew him to Anansi's door. Turtle knocked on the door. Anansi jerked open the door. And since it was the custom in his country to show hospitality to travelers, he smiled unhappily and invited Turtle to come in and share his dinner. As Turtle reached out his paw for some food, Anansi stopped him. In a shocked voice, he said, "Turtle, in my country it's bad manners to come to the table without washing. Please go to the stream and wash your dusty paws." Turtle obediently waddled down the hill and waded in the water. He washed his paws. He even washed his face. By the time he got back to Anansi's house, half the dinner was gone. Anansi was eating very fast. Turtle stretched out a paw to help himself to food. But again, Anansi stopped him. "Turtle," he said, "your paws are still dusty. Please go and wash them again."
"But it's dust from the trail,"
Turtle tried to explain. But he knew he shouldn't argue if he wanted to have any dinner. So Turtle washed his paws in the stream again. On his way back to Anansi's house, Turtle walked in the grass by the trail, and he hurried because he was very hungry. But by the time the poor Turtle returned, Anansi had eaten all the dinner and said, "That was a good dinner.
"Well, thank you for your wonderful hospitality, Anansi. Someday you must visit me,"
said the angry Turtle as he left to go home. Some months later, Anansi visited the Turtle. After creepy crawling all day through tall grass stems, he found Turtle snoozing by the river.
"Well, well, well," exclaimed the Turtle. "So you've come to share my dinner. Well, make yourself comfortable, Anansi, while I go below and prepare the food."
He dived into the river with a splash. Anansi was very hungry, so he paced the shoreline, waiting for Turtle to reappear. At last, Turtle's head popped above the water.
"Dinner is ready,"
he called to Anansi.
"Come on down."
Anansi dived headfirst into the water, sank a few inches, and then he floated to the surface. His spindly legs and tiny body prevented him from sinking. He flipped and flapped his puny arms and tried shallow dives and belly flops, but couldn't reach the bottom of the river. So the cunning spider schemed. He filled the pockets of his jacket with small round pebbles to make him heavier so he would sink to the bottom of the river. Again he dived into the water, but this time he went down, 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 and landed with a bump right at the dinner table. There before him was spread the most delicious meal he'd ever seen. There were oysters and clams and mussels and sliced eel and crabs. As a centerpiece, sprays of watercress rested against large pink shrimp. Anansi's eyes widened with pleasure at the sight of such a feast. Turtle, already seated at the table, swallowed a piece of eel and looked at Anansi and said,
"Anansi, I must remind you that in my country it is bad manners to wear a jacket to the table, so could you please take it off?"
So very slowly, Anansi removed his jacket. And very slowly, Anansi left the table. Without the weight of the pebbles to hold him down, he floated up, 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 straight up to the top of the water.
Today, life among the Ashanti is as changing as life everywhere is changing. Life in the cities of West Africa is like city life anywhere. But the stories and the legends of long ago are still told and enjoyed. Today there are hundreds of stories about Anansi. Stories like how the world got wisdom, how Spider helped the fishermen, and how the spider got a bald head. Anansi stories are told in Africa, in the West Indies, and in South Central America. Of course, in the United States. You may hear them called Anansi stories or stories of Aunt Nancy or Sister Nancy, but they're all stories about an adventurous spider. So go. Read. Read and share the tales of Anansi.
The preceding program was funded in part by a grant from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Jambo totos, karibu. These are Swahili words of greeting, meaning, hello children, welcome. This is the language heard most in East Africa, a land of many races and ways of life. The people who live in the flatlands tend herds of animals. The people who live along the mountain slopes are farmers. But in the cities along the East Coast, there are merchants, and life is similar to city life anywhere in the world. In the city and in the country, the tales and fables that were handed down years ago before anyone could read or write are still told. They are told in the evenings after sunset. The Swahili say, akili yapita male, which means wisdom is better than wealth. And where better to find wisdom than in folk tales that have their origin in peoples from many places. Stories of East Africa traveled from tribe to tribe long before there was a written language. Perhaps they were spread by traders or by a traveling storyteller. Listen. Hear the storyteller's call. Listen. Hear his call. Come, come, come listen to the time when the rabbit and elephant were the best of friends. Come listen and learn.
A long, long time ago, a rabbit lived in Africa by the name of Wakaima. Now he was very, very lazy. His best friend was a big elephant whose name was Wanjovu. They both lived together on a farm. Wanjovu the elephant worked very, very hard, and Wakaima the rabbit was very lazy and did not work at all. Now Wanjovu got tired of living with a lazy rabbit, so one day he said, "I've got a great idea. Let's each have our own farm and we can share what we grow." Wakaima agreed. They each selected a piece of land. Wanjovu worked his soil and planted seed. But instead of working on his farm, lazy Wakaima ran off into the jungle and spent the day eating wild fruit and sleeping under the trees. When evening came, Wakaima rubbed dirt over his paws and face and stumbled into the house, groaning, rubbing his back and saying, "Oh, how hard I've worked. Oh, how tired I am." Wanjovu was a good gardener and a hard worker. He planted corn, potatoes, peas, and many other vegetables. When evening came, he was really tired, but he never complained. One night, Wakaima crawled into the house with a stick or two for the fire. His paws and face were covered with dirt. "How tired I am. The work has been so hard today. I have worked all day without stopping." Wanjovu believed him and prepared dinner for both of them while Wakaima washed his paws and face before eating. Now, one evening, as they sat down to the dinner that Wanjovu had cooked, the elephant said, "Wakaima, you work much too hard on your farm." The lazy Wakaima shook his head. Then he said, "We can never work too hard. We must have plenty of food to store away before the rains come." After many weeks passed, the crops were ready. The time had come to gather in the harvest. One evening, Wanjovu came home with a large basket filled with beautiful big ears of corn and fine white potatoes. He cooked them very carefully, and he and Wakaima sat down to eat. How good the corn is, how sweet," said Wakaima. "I have never eaten finer potatoes." The next evening, Wakaima came in with a basket full of corn and potatoes and said, "These are probably not as good as yours, but we will try them." Wanjovu thought they looked very much like the corn and potatoes from his own garden, but he said nothing, knowing he would have to cook them and they would eat them for dinner. The next morning, when Wanjovu went to his farm, he saw that someone had stolen some of his corn and potatoes. That evening, he told Wakaima, "Someone got into my farm last night and stole some of my vegetables." Wakaima pretended to be very surprised. "Some thief got into my farm, too," he said. "What are we going to do about it?" Now, we all know that Wakaima had stolen the vegetables from Wanjovu because he had no vegetables in his own garden. "We must do something to keep the thief away," Wanjovu answered. "I will think of something and come up with a plan." But he did not tell his plan to Wakaima. The next day, Wanjovu went to the river and got some clay. He worked all day and made a clay man with his arms outstretched. Carefully, he carried the clay man to his farm and set it down between the corn and potatoes. Later, when the moon rose, there stood the clay man, and there was his dark shadow, black in the white moonlight. Now, when Wanjovu had been asleep for many hours, Wakaima sneaked into Wanjovu's potato patch. Suddenly, Wakaima saw a giant figure in the moonlight, and he was frightened. Could it be Wanjovu, waiting to punish him for stealing the corn and potatoes? He didn't dare move. The clay man didn't move. Finally, Wakaima gathered his courage to speak. "Hello, Wanjovu," he said. "What are you doing here at this time of the night?" The clay man did not answer. Wakaima began to lose his temper. "You are a thief who has come to steal Wanjovu's corn. Answer me or I will tell him." The clay man did not answer. Wakaima came nearer. He was puzzled. "Who are you? And why don't you answer?" he demanded. The clay man did not answer. Wakaima cautiously walked around the clay man, who looked very, very large in the moonlight. "If you don't answer me right now, I will hit you," shouted Wakaima. The clay man still did not answer. Wakaima hit the clay man hard with his paw, and it stuck in the soft clay. "Let me go, or I'll hit you with my other paw," he screamed. The clay man did not let go. Wakaima, with his other paw, punched the clay man in the stomach as hard as he could. This paw also stuck in the soft clay. "If you don't let me go," shouted Wakaima, "I will kick you with my foot." Still the clay man did not let go. Wakaima raised his foot and kicked the clay man. His foot stuck in the soft clay. He tried to pull his foot away, but it was stuck fast in the clay. Now Wakaima was very angry and tired. He lifted his other foot and kicked the clay man with all his strength, and that foot also stuck in the clay. "I will bite you in the stomach with my sharp teeth unless you let me go," screamed Wakaima. When the clay man did not let go, Wakaima butted his head against the clay man and sank his long, sharp teeth into the clay. Now his head was stuck too. His feet and paws were held tightly, and he couldn't move at all. He was stuck in the trap of the clay man. Now the next morning, as dawn broke slowly in the east, the sun came up and the birds sang their morning songs. Wanjovu rose early and went to his farm to see if the clay man had trapped the thief. Sure enough, he found Wakaima stuck in the clay man. "You wicked fellow!" he thundered. "So you are the thief who stole my food. You have your own farm, but it was easier for you to steal my corn and my potatoes than to grow your own. What a lazy, good-for-nothing rabbit you are! Now I'm going to punish you!" He pulled Wakaima free of the clay man. Poor Wakaima, he looked so ashamed and frightened. Wanjovu could not help feeling a little sorry for him. "Oh, what are you going to do with me?" sobbed Wakaima. Wanjovu thought for a long time. Finally he said, "I really should eat you. You have eaten my crops, so I should eat you. And you didn't tell me the truth. You pretended to have your own garden." "But you can't eat me alive," pleaded Wakaima. "I will have to be dead before you can eat me." "What do you want me to do?" Wanjovu asked. He was not really happy about eating Wakaima. "Throw me into the trees," Wakaima said. "Throw me very high among the branches. By the time I hit the ground, I will be dead, and then you can eat me." Wanjovu swung Wakaima around and around over his head, and finally threw him high among the branches of the trees. But when Wakaima hit the ground, he was not dead. He wasn't even hurt. That rabbit landed lightly on his feet and ran off into the jungle laughing. He had really fooled Wanjovu. Wanjovu knew he could not catch Wakaima, so he went back to his farm. Since that time, Wanjovu the elephant and Wakaima the rabbit have not spoken to one another.
Akili yapita male. In Swahili, this means wisdom is better than wealth. And where better to find wisdom than in folk tales that have their origins in the people from many places? Go and read. Read and share the tales of East Africa.